I still remember and often think about the joy that I felt when I got my first PS3. My dad brought it home from the local GameStop, but he also came home with a flat screen television in hand. Gaming now in high definition, no more playing on that clunky old CRT. Oh, how wrong I would be about that. My dad also arrived with Grand Theft Auto 4 in tow. I was incredibly excited. We didn't get a PS2 on launch, and even if we did, I would have been too young to remember it. We didn't exactly get it on launch, but it was close enough that I felt in the loop. The console generation quickly became my favorite. The jump in graphical quality meant that worlds could be realized like never before. My young brain thought that this would mean we were as close as we would ever get to realism. It was the beginning towards a shift in more modern design philosophy in games, but a lot of the titles in this generation were still holding over some of those pieces from the previous era that I loved. But having a PlayStation 3 wasn't all it was cracked up to be. The system was incredibly expensive on launch. Not that my dad had the money to afford one, something my youthful mind was blissfully unaware of at the time. Games also performed quite poorly, something I also wasn't aware of because I was just excited that I could play Lair. Over the next few months, I would have many conversations with the students at the new school that I just joined, and a lot of those conversations would inevitably turn to video games. They would eventually ask me for my gamer tag, and when I would respond that I didn't have a gamer tag, but a PSN ID, they remarked a quiet and subtle confusion. "Oh," they would respond, and our gaming talk usually ended there. One day on the bus home, I met another student named Jacob. We bonded over the book I was reading and we started talking about video games. But he wasn't talking about Halo, he was talking about Killzone and Metal Gear Solid and Resistance. He was the only other kid I knew at the time that had a PS3, and he told me that I absolutely had to try Infamous because it was fucking sick. And he was right, it was fucking sick. I played the Infamous games a lot during this console generation. I repeated them over and over again to the point that when replaying them for this video, each sequence was familiar to me. I hadn't played them in years, but every cutscene, decision, and combat encounter was firmly printed in my mind like an image burned on a plasma screen television. That never happened to me, but my dad was very worried about it. The Infamous games appealed to me as a young kid because they let me either choose to save the world or fulfill a sick and twisted power fantasy that only middle school teens could become obsessed with. But revisiting them for this video, I found them surprisingly thoughtful, well-written, and expertly crafted. They are products of their time though, dripping with flaws of a genre that wasn't fully fleshed out yet, an open world idea that the industry and developers were just toying with. This mold would eventually become the standard over time, but Infamous was one of the first to really make it a cohesive reality. The series is also woefully forgotten, with the first two games stuck on the PlayStation 3, no remaster or port in sight. The series dipped its toe in the next generation as well, with Infamous Second Son being released as an exclusive for the PlayStation 4. All of the games sold incredibly well, but after Infamous, the developer, Sucker Punch, moved on to the Ghost series. Since they don't seem to be going back to this series anytime soon, I figured I would revisit it and see where the series succeeded and where it failed. I'll be talking about all three games in the Infamous series, Infamous 1, 2, and Second Son, as well as the DLCs released for Infamous 2 and Second Son, Festival of Blood and First Light respectively. I'll also briefly talk about the Infamous comic book series, both of which bridge a little bit of the narrative gap in between games. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking it and subscribing to the channel as it really helps me out. You can also support me over on Patreon, where I upload movie reviews about video game adaptations, monthly media reports where I talk about every single piece of media that I consumed that month, and sometimes videos with copyrighted material since YouTube doesn't let me upload that. The Patreon is a great way to support the channel, and I'm committed to making it an even better value in 2026. Hey Dad, it's me, your favorite son, and today I'd like to talk about the Infamous series. Development on Infamous began somewhere around 2006. After Sucker Punch Productions had capped off their trilogy of Sly games, a series centered around a thieving raccoon and his band of misfit teammates, a series I'll also certainly talk about at some point on this channel, the studio turned their gaze to something completely different. While Sly was about stealth, hacking, and subterfuge, Infamous was about outright combat and action. In-your-face brazen destruction throughout city streets, while Sly centered its story around cartoon-like characters, anthropomorphic animals. Infamous told a story based closer to reality, human characters dealing with, ultimately, human issues. Many interviewers and people from the studio at this time drew comparisons to Naughty Dog, who had gone from developing Crash Bandicoot and Jak and Daxter on the PS1 and the PS2 respectively, to developing the Uncharted series on the PlayStation 3. With generational hardware upgrades, realism was at the forefront, and teams meant to shift their aesthetic design away from stylized characters to realistic worlds and grounded narratives. Sly was subtle, fun, and sneaking, while Infamous was set to be loud, bombastic, and boisterous. Undone were the shackles of restraint, electricity was meant to reign, and superheroes or villains would have their day. Two things were clear from the beginning. The team wanted to make a game about becoming a superhero, and make that game set in an open world. A lot of this inspiration came from the team playing Grand Theft Auto 3 and the urge to use superpowers within that world. I think everybody fired up Grand Theft Auto 3 and thought, this game is cool. I wish I were a superhero in this city. I mean, it's kind of obvious, right? So the team set out to make Infamous, a story centered around a bike messenger who suddenly has superpowers thrust upon him. Other inspirations for the game were taken from comics. The story arc in Batman No Man's Land told a tale about Gotham suffering a large earthquake and the city being blockaded from the rest of the world after civilians were evacuated. DMZ told a story about an intern journalist being stranded in a destroyed Manhattan during a civil war in America. Stories like Batman Begins provided a good basis for the superhero origin story that the game would tell, and games like Spider-Man 2 offered inspiration in the way of traversal. The team spent over 3 years working on the game. An open-world game of this size, with a team of only 60, was certainly ambitious, and increasing that team size would mean that the game would be done faster, but it would also increase costs. Sucker Punch eventually decided to keep their small team and take their time. Most of the money they would spend would be on personnel, and reducing those costs was critical to creating such a massive project. The extra time also allowed the team to prune some of the elements of the game that weren't working. The game was originally designed to contain a city management aspect that the team compared to The Sims. You would be able to talk to pedestrians and try to cheer them up, taking care of the population firsthand. This mechanic obviously didn't work, and after months of effort, it was taken out. There were also many powers that just weren't fun or didn't serve the purpose of the game. But Sucker Punch pruned and pruned until they got it right. The game was revealed at E3 in 2007, initially with a 2008 release date. The team would miss their initial release by a year, but eventually Infamous released for the PlayStation 3 on May 26, 2009 in North America, May 29, 2009 in the EU, and June 4, 2009 in Australia. Infamous sees you playing a character named Cole McGrath. Cole wakes up mysteriously the day after a massive terrorist attack in his home, Empire City. He wakes up in the center of the blast, miraculously unharmed and harboring new powers, the ability to control electricity. Controlling these powers is what makes up the bulk of Infamous's gameplay. We use powers to interact with objects, to move rubble or boxes for those in need, and most importantly, to zap the bad guys. The main power that Cole is given at the beginning of the game is a simple lightning zap. He can shoot enemies with a small bolt of electricity, only doing a small amount of damage if hitting them in the body. Hitting them in the head does a much larger amount of damage though, and most of the time takes the enemy out. One of the main goals of the game though is to bring back power to Empire City. This is done by entering the sewers and reactivating the substations underneath the streets. Once this is done, Cole gains a new power. Slowly but surely, our kit is expanded and we have access to more and more abilities. A shock grenade that can be tossed to blast a group of foes into the air, a shockwave that lifts anything in front of it into the air, a missile that is launched from our fingertips, and eventually the ability to call a lightning storm from the sky. Something that Infamous is fantastic at is slowly giving the player more power over the course of the game. Slow but sure pacing informs the general structure of the game, constantly ensuring that combat, traversal, and gameplay in general never gets stale. Sucker Punch stated this was their intention with the game, to create a progression from average dude to super-powered behemoth. To this end, they had some distinct rules that they used to select and distribute powers. 1. Make sure that each power you give the player is useful and adds something to the game that makes it feel fresh again. This is achieved with nearly every power in the game. When we achieve the ability to levitate or skate across power lines, movement is transformed. Where jumping from one building top to another could leave us careening for the pavement below and quickly trying to climb back up in a haze of shame and failure, we can now hover to make that distance, or grind on electric wires like some kind of super-powered Rodney Mullen. The point is that each of these powers do have impact and genuinely change the gameplay. Whether it's a new tool in taking out enemies or a new ability that lets you get around easier, the game makes a point to constantly offer the player a steady stream of new and useful tools. 2. Make sure the player immediately has a chance to use a new power and understand what makes it fun and useful. This is reflected in the substation sections. Each area generally takes us through a mini tutorial, forced to use our new power to take out the goons attacking us. This gives us the immediate ability to see the advantage that we've just been given, provide the player with a useful tool, and then show them exactly how to use it so they use it more often. 3. Make sure the most effective way to play is also the most enjoyable way to play. There's a lot of fun to be had in the superhero playground that Sucker Punch has developed. It was pretty clear that enjoyment was at the forefront of most of their decisions. In an interview with producer Brian Fleming, he said that the team often had great ideas that felt like they would be fun for the player, and then they tried to work those into the story. Satisfying is the best word to describe the combat, though. While its aiming system isn't anything compared to modern projects, getting a headshot or a grenade that lands directly in the center of a few enemies leaves you feeling triumphant. These 3 rules lord over the gameplay system, specifically when it relates to powers. It creates a system that is both fulfilling, progression equals more power and more fun, but also challenging. The enemies that we go up against, at least in the beginning of the game, are the hooded and shadowy Reapers, figures that have taken over Empire City in the wake of the bomb. They have used the chaos to reign over the rubble, creating a second cataclysm, one of prolonged destruction rather than a short burst. These enemies too evolve over the course of the game. Eventually we fight stronger Reapers who have gained powers, new factions like the Dustmen and First Sons who are both quite a bit stronger. Further conduits like the Junk Golem and the First Son Giants of the later stages provide hurdles for the player. Certain enemies require a specific approach. Rocket launcher thugs necessitate using the shockwave to deflect their missiles. Snipers need precision shots, and the groups beg and plead for a large missile or grenade to be thrown in their center. But the largest system that Infamous boasts is its karma system, the main selling point for the game. Will you become a hero or a villain? This choice is meant to be up to the player, a decision thrust into their lap, not one that they asked for, but not one that Cole asked for either. Throughout the course of the game, you will be presented with choices. These represent a crossroads, a moral quandary that the player has to weigh in on, an opportunity for the audience to exert their force upon the game world. All choices in the game are binary, though. Either you take the good route or the evil route. For example, at the beginning of the game, after a cache of food is dropped into Empire City's local park, you are given the choice to leave the food for the people that need it, or to take it for yourself. This choice, the first one, is easily one of the most obvious. The choices in the game range from mustache-twirling villainy to a genuine choice that someone could or would make under the circumstances. Infamous does contain moral complexity, and when viewed through a certain lens, can showcase the rise of a broken man ascending to either godhood or vicious authoritarian king. These choices determine the path that you take throughout the game, but mainly they impact your karma level. Your karma level is a sliding scale, either heading towards good or evil. Each side has 3 ranks, the good ranks being Guardian, champion, and finally, hero. And the evil side also has 3 ranks: thug, outlaw, and infamous. With each rank, you gain the ability to upgrade each of the powers that you have obtained, 1 level higher. Each power shifts with the choices that you make, and there are 2 specific powers that Cole can only obtain if on one side of the karma meter. If you take the good side, then you'll gain the ability to use the Overload Burst power, and if you're on the evil side, you gain the ability to use the Arc Lightning power. The difference in these powers is small but important. The Arc Lightning power is generally an AoE attack. Both chain to multiple targets, but Arc Lightning is a wild unleashing of powerful energy with no regard for the people that are in front of you. Overload Burst is more of a precision shot that chains to targets afterwards, an attempt to save civilian lives while taking out as many bad guys as you can. These large decisions are going to inform the big choices that you make. The story implications of those choices will inform the narrative that you're given. But the more important choices that you make are the moment-to-moment decisions. When in combat, completing stunts and different combat objectives will net you experience points. This is how you upgrade your powers in the first place, but there's a ranking to these objectives. Did you heal someone who was wounded on the street? That's going to give you some experience, but also some good karma. Did you restrain an enemy combatant instead of killing them? That's also going to give you some good karma. Did you take out a ton of civilians on purpose? That's going to give you evil karma. A lot of these combat accolades are neutral, meaning that they appear with a gray color instead of blue or red. For example, getting a head shock on an enemy is neutral. It's neither good or bad, it just displays your combat prowess. Interestingly though, the wounded kill accolade, meaning you killed an enemy when they were already downed, is neutral. Now, this is obviously a gameplay choice. In the heat of battle, there are many times where you're chucking grenades and some wounded enemies get hit, so you often just see the accolade pop up without you even realizing what you did. If you were constantly punishing the player for killing enemies when they're downed, the game wouldn't be much about choice. It would be incredibly difficult to preserve the lives in this battle, and let's be fair, the enemies were attacking you first, so it's technically self-defense. But it does seem to say something about the state of the city that murdering someone who is wounded and isn't fighting is seen as a neutral action. Whether based in gameplay or not, it reflects a doomed wasteland for Empire City, a horrible, wretched place full of murderous individuals and opportunists. So bad that the omnipotent morality system that's watching over you just says, yeah, you know what, that's fine. Speaking of the city, Cole gets his powers from the city. The electricity in his body is generated from the power grid running beneath your feet and above your head. A small bar at the top of the screen notes how many battery cores you have, and these are expanded when using your powers in the game. Health in combat is represented by the color of the screen while taking damage. The closer it gets to monochrome, the closer we are to death. Cole can regenerate both health and battery cores by feeding electricity from nearby cars, streetlights, power boxes, AC units, public phones, anything holding even a little bit of a charge. Cole's energy literally comes from the city itself, from his environment, and the city is a character in the story in its own right, but we'll talk about that briefly. Another large part of gameplay that should probably get its own due is traversal. The developers spent a lot of time and were very excited about the fact that their city was very traversable. They stated in a lot of interviews that this took a very long time and tons of effort to pull off, and it is entirely traversable. You can climb every building, jumping on small window panes and light fixtures to work your way to the top. Levitating around the city and grinding on power lines is exciting and fun, but traversal is easily the buggiest and most finicky part of the game. It's incredibly dated when compared to most modern traversal systems, and even when compared to the second and third games in this series. It can often feel frustratingly slow. At the time, though, the system was impressive and gave the game a massive scope that it really needed to further its message. Floating around the streets from above, skating across rooftops at a breakneck speed, puts Cole above the citizens of Empire City. It eventually ascends him to a type of godhood, an immortality that can only exist in the sky. It also gives the player a better view of Empire City, one that can only be seen from the lens that sits atop the buildings and infrastructure. This will be an important concept when we talk about the story in a moment, but actually using this system can lead to irritation. Often things that should be climbable just are not. Sometimes the game bugs out and our camera just whips to the side while climbing, sending us careening off a building we've been slowly toiling away at. And it's just a bit too slow for its own good, especially when you have enemies shooting at you from all sides and you really either need to get away or to attack them up close. The levitate power, seemingly in the interest of not being too overpowered, also just doesn't let you go far enough. And even by the end of the game, you feel like you can't cross gaps that you should be able to. It grounds Cole a bit more, but I think it works against the story that the game is trying to tell, one of ascent. The deification of a normal man doesn't quite work as well if he's failing to cross a gap in the streets and falls down to the pavement below, only to look around to ensure that no one just saw that. But I suppose in that way, it furthers the normalcy of Cole himself. With that, we should probably talk about the story of Infamous. The game begins as Cole McGrath, a simple bike messenger, wakes up in the center of an explosion. His city, Empire City, has been decimated. Buildings are collapsing around us, and we escape the falling debris as Cole discovers electricity now running through his veins. Cole meets his best friend Zeke on the other side of the city as he barely makes it out before the bridge collapses, and Cole falls to the ground. As the days passed, Cole fell into a coma. The only two people by his side were his girlfriend Trish and Zeke. People in the city have started to get sick after the bomb, and gangs now run rampant, taking advantage of the vulnerable populace. Cops are dead or scared, and anarchy rules the streets. The US government has quarantined the city for fear of the plague spreading, and 2 weeks into the blockade, Cole wakes up to discover his new powers. This is where the game begins, as the city has already descended into chaos, and the situation has become increasingly dire. Zeke and Cole are on top of their rooftop apartment as we're tasked with charging the batteries on the roof so Zeke can watch TV. We pretty quickly see a broadcast from a local gonzo reporter / conspiracy theorist named the Voice of Survival. The government has dropped a cache of food into Archer Square, and he advises the public to head over there quickly before the Reapers, the local gang running the show in Empire City, to get their fair share before the bad guys do.
The liars running the corporate media tell us that we're going to get our fair share, that more is coming. That's easy for them to say.
We help Zeke pick up a gun from a local cache while he and Cole reminisce about their past escapades, and Trish calls, worried about Cole after her sister's death in the blast. At Archer Park, we have to knock down the supplies and fend them off from the Reapers. We then get our first choice of the game. Do we want to give the supplies to the people, or zap a few people in the crowd and keep the supplies for Cole and Zeke? This is easily, in my opinion, the worst choice in the game because there is almost no incentive for the player to choose the evil route here unless they just want to be evil. There might be motivation for Cole to choose this because he and Zeke will get the supplies, pure selfishness on display, but not for the player. Do not fear though, because most of the other choices in the game have a lot more depth and moral ambiguity to them. After this, regardless of the choice, Cole's image is displayed on nearby billboards by the TV jacker. It's an image of Cole with the Ray Sphere, the device that seems to have caused the massive explosion in Empire City on the day of the blast, or he at least had some part in it. And this is where the people turn on him. Cole doesn't remember anything from that day, just that he was delivering a package as a bike messenger. The public rejects Cole as a terrorist, the one that caused the destruction, and Trish's feelings are even more complicated. Cole has been implicated for killing her sister, and she can't easily move past that. This is the complicated situation that Infamous puts the player and its protagonist in, which is partly why the decision made before this situation is revealed is the worst one. But now there is essentially a reason for Cole to take the evil route, to shun the people and use his powers for evil instead of good. Directly after this scene, the public begins chasing you and throwing rocks at your head. Would you want to save a people that react to an innocent person like this? It's not a morally sound decision, but there's at least more incentive than blue or red colored lightning. Cole and Zeke immediately make their way to the nearby bridge to try and break the quarantine and exit the city. This quickly comes with another choice, to either break the line of police by attacking them openly, or attacking them from within the crowd and using the pedestrians as a shield. Choosing the heroic option here is obviously easy, but the advantage of the evil option is focused on gameplay. It makes this section just a bit easier, so we don't take as much damage. There's also justification for Cole. He may have been angered by the public outlash and decide to take out his anger by turning the police on the crowd. Regardless, Cole and Zeke push through the bridge, but are met with a wall of bullets at the end. Cole crashes into the harbor to avoid the gunfire and is taken in by an FBI agent named Moya. Her husband John was sent to infiltrate the First Sons, a secret group working on the ray sphere that seemingly destroyed the city. The ray sphere was meant to drain the electric energy from the people around it and concentrate it into one person. She's lost contact with John though and wants Cole to go back into the city to look for him and the ray sphere. If he does this, his name will be cleared. Moya now has a direct line with us throughout the game. She can track us, will contact us and give us different missions, and is certainly keeping an eye on Cole. Reuniting with Zeke, Cole fills him in on what's going on with Moya. At this point, we have 3 main missions that we can take on, but this is also the point where the game starts to open up a bit. We can now take on side quests, which are an important part of the world and the gameplay. Side quests, when completed, offer experience just like the main quests, but they will also remove the gangs from an area of the city, essentially taking back control of that part of the city from the Reapers or Dustmen or First Sons. In that area of the city, enemies will not respawn, so you'll no longer have to face a hail of bullets when trying to get from one place to another. This is incredibly useful, but I wouldn't say that all of the side quests are stellar. They range from very tedious and boring to interesting extensions of main missions. Easily the worst missions are these counter-surveillance tasks where you have to remove bugging devices from a building for the community. You have to climb around the building and zap these little glowing red devices by getting up close to them. Coupled with the sometimes clunky climbing system, these can be a real pain. They also just take too long for the rewards we're actually getting here. Most of the interesting missions are just smaller repeats of the main story missions though, like the Terror Bus mission that sees us taking out armored buses harassing citizens. There are some decent unique ones like the Evil Side mission that forces us to cause a certain amount of chaos in the street to draw out authorities. As we progressively clear out areas of the district, Zeke will call us to tell us how the public is responding to our actions, both good and bad.
I was looking at those posters of you people have been hanging, and I think we should start a line of them. You know, use them to make some cashola. Think about it. Don't know what you're doing out there, but people are starting to be afraid of you. Real afraid. Hell, maybe that's the only way to keep the streets safe. See ya.
Zeke sides with us either way though. If we're being the valiant knight whose crusade is to save the city from miscreants, then he rewards us on a job well done. If we're lording over the place like we own it and using our powers to take more for ourselves, then he decides to side with the winning team. Zeke is a bit of an opportunist, but we'll get into that more later. It's also worth noting that there are good and evil missions as well, 5 for each of the 3 districts. These good missions usually involve saving more people from Reapers or other gangs, but the evil missions either see Cole straight up attacking police or blowing shit up for fun. The overall reward that you get for clearing out the different zones in each district are incredibly useful though, and not having enemies harassing you in the area makes exploration and completion way more enjoyable. And there is a lot of exploration for us to do around the city. 2 of the main collectibles in the game are blast shards and dead drops. Blast shards are small pieces of debris that were sent flying from the initial ray sphere blast. They are imbued with some sort of power though, and collecting enough of them increases the amount of blast cores that we have to use in combat. The other collectible, dead drops, are small satellites that contain partial audio messages from John. We can pick these up as we unlock new areas to try and piece together his story. There are a ton of blast shards around the map, and collecting them all is certainly a huge task in and of itself. The next 3 main missions that we can take on see us finding the first few dead drops that John left and finding out that he's holed up somewhere running away from the First Sons. We have to track down Moya's contact, which we can do by tracing a dead person's energy and tracking their resonance. One of the Reapers blows up a substation and we're sent into the sewers to reactivate it. This gives us our first power, the ability to heal wounded individuals. If going for an evil playthrough, then you can drain them of their energy instead. At the end of the sewers, another moral choice. Moya's contact is here, but he's worried about his girlfriend, the woman we found dead in the alley. We can either tell him what happened to her, or zap him in the face and break our way through. And the third mission is pretty simple: save a medical clinic from the Reapers attacking it. But the next main mission sends us to charge a cell tower for Moya so she can keep tracking us. What follows is another simple sewer section where we gain the shock grenade ability. After this, Moya sends us to investigate a sickness in the local park. Trish is treating the ill, and Cole tries to make amends with her, but she doesn't want to hear it. We close the valve that's distributing this tar into the water. The tar covers Cole as he closes the valve, and we begin to see strange manifestations and hear the voice of a woman.
I've been watching you, Cole.
Trish manages to get rid of this by covering Cole in a first aid spray, but there are 2 more water mains that need to be closed. The same thing happens when we shut these off as well, but with the last one, we can choose to have someone else do it for us, forcing them to close the valve by zapping them with electricity, or just closing it ourselves. We can then blow up the truck under the road that's pumping the tar into the water. This moral decision is probably one of the most important ones in the early game. So we've talked basically about the morality of Infamous, and as I've stated before, there is a precedent, an understandable one, for Cole taking the evil path, but it hasn't been fully realized yet. There might be a reason for Cole to take some of his anger out on the people. Remember, he's just a regular person, he isn't a superhero. But that's what the world is asking him to be. It's asking him to take on the rage of the people and to shirk it off, to not only leave it behind, but to do the right thing in their wake. That's the path that the good side takes you down, a regular person who has been elevated by power and has used it only for good. But the game turns the people against you because Infamous in itself is concerned with what the player will do when faced with a difficult question. Can you be hit by rocks and walk away? And can the player resist the urge to unleash their power on the citizens? But when faced with the tar, a different element is introduced. The tar itself actually reduces the amount of battery cores that we have. It's a temporary effect, but an effect nonetheless. So, will you deal with the tar, making your path through this mission more difficult, or will you have someone else do it for you? Will you take on the pain of the people for yourself, or will you make their pain worse? So, when there's this big ham-fisted choice, good or evil, they say, I'm going to be good. Then when crap hits the fan, they actually use their superpowers to blast people. They don't run away and do the high-minded thing. So it's really, I don't know if that's super germane, but what's interesting is that it's actually the real moment when if you had superpowers, what would you do with them? Nate Fox talked about this in plenty of different interviews, specifically the judicious use of power, and how the moment-to-moment gameplay was more important than the decisions that you make yourself. Now, if you place Cole on a pedestal, then it doesn't make sense for him to force someone else to open the valve. But if you view Cole as just a normal guy, a person who had power thrust upon him, who never asked for it, then it does make sense to choose the evil path sometimes. There are choices in the game that are inexplicably wrong, and there's no reason to really ever make a justification for them. The game oscillates back and forth between morally gray choices and cartoonish villainry. But easily, the thing that it does the best is try to create a realistic scenario. A real man, a bike messenger, who has had power forced on him, and thus is forced to make decisions. Infamous usually does this very well, and is one of the best examples of a realistic superhero tale, even after years and years of being mired in superhero media, while also being an incredibly fun superhero power fantasy. Cole is next given a mission to save a train in the city by standing on the front cab and protecting it from attacks. When this is complete, Cole is given a hero's welcome, and regardless of karma rating at this point, Cole really doesn't want their welcome. He's already dejected at how they've treated him, but you will view this scene differently based on the choices that you've made.
Hypocrites. Yesterday they wanted my head on a platter. Now they act like I'm one of the family. But truth be told, it was nice, even for that short time, to be treated like a hero.
Cole then finds Trish treating the sick in the city again. The people of Empire City are still getting ill, even though we destroyed the tanker. In this mission, we find out that tar is being pumped into water towers around the city. A choice again. Blow the machines off with the shockwave and take the brunt of the tar, once again reducing our battery cores for this mission, or overcharge the tar and let it backflow into the water supply. Destroying the last of these machines sees us come face to face with someone else who has powers. He doesn't say much before showing Cole visions of a future, death and destruction across the city. Cole has realized that this man is the source of it, and that the Ray Sphere is involved. Back at the rooftop apartment, Zeke has looked into Moya. He found out she has connections to DARPA and warns Cole that he needs to be careful because DARPA are a secret agency that works with the Pentagon. Cole sort of writes this off, but Zeke is concerned about the government having control of the Ray Sphere. Now, Zeke definitely has reason to believe this. The media has been lying about the event to the people on the outside. This is displayed by the news broadcasts that we can come across throughout the game. The next mission has us protecting a medical crate for Trish. After she sees us helping out the community, it warms her up to Cole a little bit. Moya then tasks Cole with finding the source of the tar being pumped into the city. We can trace it underground to a large crater in the earth. People are being kept captive down here as the tar pours over them. The voices that we heard earlier get louder and louder, and we're finally confronted with Sasha, our first boss battle of the game. We have to avoid her apparitions while also doing damage to her. Completing each phase of damage allows us to pull out machines in her body that seem to be giving her powers. Once defeating Sasha, Cole interrogates her. Before he can get info, the cavern is blown up. The First Sons already got here to extract her. Cole is then forced to evacuate to the Warren, the next district of the game. Here we're introduced to the Dustmen. They're like the Reapers, but a bit larger and with a massive focus on wearing garbage all over their body. We immediately start reactivating substations and gaining new powers. Zeke quickly calls us, though, to do a task for him, to track down a guy for a girl that he's trying to sleep with. We also take a mission from Moya to reactivate the bridges between the two districts that we've been in. This requires getting an engineer for each side and jumping back and forth to defend them. I actually really like this mission because the transition to the new district is shepherded by it. We're halfway in between the Reapers and the Dustmen, both getting familiar with our new enemy and revisiting our old one. During one of the missions, we're confronted by a poster artist that asks us to pick one of two designs. The more that we clear out areas of the city, the more these posters will flood the buildings in the streets. And of course, there is a feared and loved poster. I initially didn't like this mission, but honestly, it screams of choosing a propaganda to spread. In that way, it pushes the evil path even further, making an evil Cole seem like he's forcefully spreading his fear, not just through his powers, but through information and design as well. Zeke is eventually taken captive by the Dustmen, stored in a massive village of shipping containers. We have to infiltrate the place and eventually save Zeke. He was trying to get information on the enemy and help us out, but he got kidnapped instead. He gets pissed when Cole tells him that he shouldn't be putting his life on the line, and it's clear that a rift is starting to grow. We take out some Dustmen who have captured citizens on boats and take down some spy drones to try and get more information about John. One thing that I really liked about the mission structures in Infamous is that they're evenly split in motivation and subject matter. Half of them are chores for Moya to work towards her motives and take down the First Sons, but the other half of the missions are trying to keep the city intact. There is a character in the game that we haven't really talked about yet, and that's Empire City. The city is a character on its own, growing and changing not only with the story, but with the type of game that we choose to play. Decide to complete more side missions? Then the city is clear. Take on less, and it's a lawless wasteland. Have more good karma? Then the crowds love you and adore you. Do more evil actions, and they hate you and throw stones. The most interesting part of this, though, is that Cole gets his power from this character. We regenerate battery cores and health from electricity, from the power grid. When we enter the dark parts of the city before we've turned on substations, then we have almost no way, other than cars, to get electricity. It's usually a difficult trek to get to these substations, a journey, because without electricity, Cole is nothing. This makes Cole's power feel a bit fragile, not in terms of gameplay, but in terms of narrative consequences. If Cole was in the middle of the woods, he would be screwed. It's only because he's in the city that he's allowed to exert his force over the world, whether good or bad. But there's this large aspect of community at play in Infamous, helping the medical centers with protection from the Reapers, helping Trish take care of people in the city, rescuing those who are in danger. With these actions, the city heals. Trish next asks Cole for help again, but we also get a call from Kessler. He places an importance here on the value of the life and the responsibility that Cole has with his powers. He will enforce this idea further later in the game. Helping Trish sees us controlling a bus full of patients that's rigged with infinite electricity. As we move through the two districts, we are assaulted by armies of Reapers and Dustmen. Arriving at the hospital, though, Cole is hit with a direct blast. The man that dealt the blow is named Alden, an old, grizzled warrior with the power of telekinesis. Cole somehow knows his past immediately, that he was born under a leader of the First Sons and groomed for rule. Kessler took over despite this, and Alden was relegated to the streets. He's taken the bus for himself. With Trish inside, we have to get up there and save her. Trish finally opens up here and makes amends to Cole. After this, strangely, Sasha speaks to Cole again and is upset that he's with Trish. We then need to take out some armed buses in the city, which requires levitating onto their roofs and blowing up their engines. Moya then tells us they've tracked Alden down and we need to go assist with his capture. This level takes place in another massive junkyard castle. Infiltrating the place, we have to defeat a Dustmen conduit at the end, a giant scrap golem. Our help allows the police to capture Alden and we take him into custody. Almost immediately, we're sent to the prison to help secure him. This mission involves defending the city from a hail of trash meteors, a huge group of Dustmen, and scrap golems. Zeke was supposed to be watching over Alden, though, and he manages to escape. We then finally get a lead on John, but a chopper is sent and blows up Cole's spot. We locate John anyways, but he's scared off by the federal presence and makes a run for it. We get an open line of communication with him now, though. He tells us that the Ray Sphere is on top of Alden's tower. When Cole brings up Moya, though, John reveals that he's never been married and doesn't know the woman. Zeke was right. She was playing us all along. John isn't even a part of the FBI. We can then take Zeke to ascend Alden's tower in what is an ultimately pretty janky mission. A lot of the climbable objects just don't really function super well, and falling all the way down makes us restart from a previous checkpoint. Once we reach the top, we faced more Dustmen, and Zeke manages to grab the Ray Sphere in the heat of battle. But instead of handing it over to Cole, he activates it. He chooses to kill thousands around him, just for a taste of what Cole has. Even though the sphere was activated, though, nothing happens. Kessler makes a deal with Zeke. If he comes with him, he'll give him the powers that he wants. He takes the deal and heads off in a chopper with Kessler. We then get our boss fight with Alden as he's tearing apart one of the bridges in Empire City. He's taken the form of an even larger scrap golem that we have to destroy. We basically shoot him until he reveals his body and then do damage to him. Alden tries to make peace with Cole at the end, but he jumps off the bridge before Cole can make any real decision. Heading into the historic district, we're nearing the end of the game. The last open area that the game has for us is ahead. Trying to reactivate substations on the other side has Kessler truly flipping his supervillain switch. He's captured people around the city and has them fenced off with electricity. If we don't get to them in time, he'll activate the bombs strapped to them. Rescuing a couple of these groups reveals Kessler's real plot. He's tied up 6 doctors on one building and Trish on the other. We can only save one building's worth of people. It's basically the trolley problem, except with a lot of further complications, and it's one of the most interesting choices in the entire game. So we've talked a lot about the hero's responsibility. Your choice here is whether Cole will share the pain of his people and rise to the top, saving the city, or whether he will succumb to the greed of power. But there hasn't yet been real cost for Cole. There has been huge, massive repercussions of these choices. We've seen the narrative implication of Zeke leaving him and deciding to pursue power instead of friendship. But there was no choice in that. It just happened to Cole. This is a choice that Cole has to make. Spoiler alert, Trish dies either way. It was rigged by Kessler from the start. But the important thing here is the lens that you view this event through. Does Cole decide to make that choice to save the doctors and sacrifice Trish for the good of the people? Because if he does, then he is essentially fully realized as a hero. He has given up his personal attachments, essentially transforming into a public good, a tool that's meant as a service to the people rather than a human man. I mean, this is essentially the same thing that happens in Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. In that film, the Joker has captured both Harvey Dent and Rachel, Bruce Wayne's love interest. He only has enough time to save one of them, and Batman decides initially to save Rachel, but the Joker swapped the addresses because he knew what Batman would do. So even the Caped Crusader himself couldn't kill this human part of him. At the end of this movie, he of course does become the villain that the city needs. He is eventually willing to take on the pain of the people so that they don't have to bear it. Cole is expected by the morality system of the game to do what even Batman couldn't do, to sacrifice Trish for the good of the city. If he doesn't do this and tries to save Trish, then he's been played once again. He tried and failed. A jaded, bitter, vitriolic emotion pumping through his veins gets even stronger. This, of course, gives Cole even more motivation to take out Kessler. He wants revenge at this point, good or evil. Kessler now plans on covering the city in a toxin that will enrage the people and use them as an army against Cole. So we have to stop these balloons from spraying the toxin. This is actually one of my favorite missions. These fun set pieces are flying all around the city. To take each one down, we have to destroy the drone that's flying around it and shooting missiles at us. We then have to destroy the shield with our new lightning ability and then jump on top of the platform and decouple it from the balloon. It's just a great little mission that makes you feel like you're getting things done, having a real-world impact. Taking these out, we're sent on a mission with John where he flies a helicopter and we stand on an electrically charged platform to defend it. The chopper is looking for signals, small satellites that are hidden in the city that we have to destroy. Once this is all done, John tracks the ray sphere to a specific building. We have to destroy the anti-air guns so that he can get to it, and we eventually follow a truck carrying the thing to a small dock. Here, we're finally confronted with our final choice. Do we activate the ray sphere and gain even more powers, or do we destroy it? Either way, John is killed in the blast, but the interesting thing about it is that no matter your karma level at this point in the game, if you activate the ray sphere, you're immediately given max evil karma level. This is seen as an irredeemable choice in the game's eyes. After this, Kessler calls Cole and tells him to meet him at the blast site for the final confrontation. We have our last boss battle here. Kessler has multiple attacks, one where he shoots beams at us that we must dodge, one where he sends shockwaves out from the ground, one where he dashes up to us to deliver a close strike, and one where he tosses bombs around himself. He eventually will get tired if we dodge his attacks enough and collapse to the ground. We can then use this opportunity to deal damage to him. I will say that I think every single time that I've played this game, I've initially started on hard difficulty and then gotten to this boss and turned the difficulty back to normal. This boss on hard is just ridiculous, but on any other difficulty, it's a pretty great fight. Once we take Kessler down, he whispers, "Trish, I love you. Please forgive me." He then reveals the truth to Cole. Kessler was faced with a powerful foe, something that wanted to erase all life from the planet. Kessler had the powers to stop it, but he chose to flee with his family. Of course, the beast destroyed everything, and Kessler's family was killed regardless. He somehow gained the power to travel back in time, to try and fix things. This is how he got to our reality, taking control of the first sons in the past and accelerating the Ray Sphere's development. But then the largest twist the game has to offer. Kessler is actually Cole from a different reality. He sent himself back in time to try and mold Cole into a powerful being that could face the beast when it comes. But if Kessler loves Trish, why did he have Trish killed? Well, Kessler was essentially creating a superhero origin story for Cole, ensuring that he wouldn't be tied down to this world. He was creating a public good, a tool that could be used by the world by shirking the man that was inside. Kessler dies after this. Cole is angry and motivated to face the beast, and both good and evil playthroughs get this same ending. But it's what comes after the credits that are different based on your karma. In the good ending, Cole has made peace with this new life. He's realized that he's loved by the people, but he understands their love is fickle. In the evil version, though, he realizes that he runs this city now, and the people here are his subjects, ready to do as they're told, or forced. One of the best things about Infamous is that the cutscenes are mostly the same regardless of your choices, but it's about the lens that you view those cutscenes through. Cole is a pretty jaded guy at his core, and that doesn't change just because he's saving people. In that version of events, he doesn't want to be saving people. He doesn't want to be relied upon. It's a burden, but he does it anyways. And when he's angry at the love of the people on the evil side, there's a hatred there. There's contempt, not just for the fickle nature of the public opinion, but hatred for the community. He sees their use only in selfishness. But what about Zeke? Zeke is probably the most interesting character in the game. Because, in my opinion, the game spends most of its runtime convincing us of moral binaries. It assigns morality to every choice in the game. We are given ratings, rankings, and rewards based on our choices. But Zeke is not overseen by the omnipotent karma meter that rules Cole. He is a moral gray. For most of the game, Zeke is an opportunist. He sees Cole's power only in the ways that it can help them. This is best displayed in the ways that Zeke responds to your karma meter. If you're clearing out the city and leaning towards good, he tells you this is fantastic and the city has never looked better. But if you're evil and clearing out the city, he tells you that people are becoming scared, and he still ultimately sides with you. He wants to ride the train of Cole's powers and get as much as he can out of it. Hell, one of the main missions is essentially helping Zeke get laid. And eventually he decides that helping out Cole isn't enough, that he needs to take power for himself. He makes the choice to activate the Ray Sphere, and even though it's the only choice that the game determines is irredeemable, Zeke still tries anyways. He comes back at the end of the game during the fight with Kessler and tries to help Cole, because Zeke is human. He makes mistakes, he's complicated, and most importantly, he doesn't have powers. He isn't held up to this standard that Cole is. He won't be a symbol. He's just a guy trying to help. And sure, sometimes he's selfish. Sometimes he's a downright piece of shit. But that's the beauty in it. Juxtaposing the moral binary character with the one that falls somewhere in the middle. The side missions in the city best showcase the moral lens as well. Why are you clearing out the city? Are you doing it to help the people, or are you doing it because you want to remove any authoritarian competition in the area? On the evil side, the population is trading one ruler for another. The Reapers, the Dustmen, the First Sons for Cole. And he's arguably a far more dangerous ruler because he seemingly can't be killed. For a game that is so binary, it does have a lot to say about morality, and it is particularly interesting outside of the cartoonish choices. In the end, Infamous is a fantastic game that I think is a bit too forgotten in the modern day. The gameplay is fun, and some of the best missions in the game are the ones where you're allowed to let loose. given unlimited energy and asked to wipe out swarms of goons. Go haywire and throw as many grenades into the crowd as you can. It's a great time with a really interesting narrative that delivers on emotional punch. Infamous would be critically acclaimed, most praising it as a peak for the PlayStation 3 as a system at the time. The game has an 85 out of 100 on Metacritic. It sold very well too, shipping almost 2 million copies in a little over a year. Of course, Sucker Punch would follow this up with a sequel, releasing a little over 2 years after the first game did. Before we move on, I'd just like to take a quick detour to talk about the 2 very short comics that were published in the Infamous universe. The first comic was actually a digital comic only, published on IGN's website. It was called Infamous Post Blast. This comic takes place briefly before the first game, but I chose to talk about both comics after the first game, because I just did, okay? Post Blast follows John as he is tracking Cole, who unknowingly has the ray sphere in his backpack. John is actually trying to kill him to prevent him from using it, but he misses his shot and Cole detonates the thing. We then briefly see Cole awake in the hospital as he accidentally uses his powers for the first time. At the end of the first issue, John realizes that he's been abandoned in Empire City and is going to have to fend for himself. In the second issue, Cole is waking up after having died briefly. Zeke clues him into his new powers, but Cole, of course, doesn't believe him. Trish vouches for what Zeke is saying, and John gets caught in a group of the infected civilians while trying to board an escape boat. The second issue ends as Cole is realizing that Trish is terrified of him. The third issue begins in the Warrens as John is hiding from some dustmen. Meanwhile, Zeke is trying to help Cole get control of his abilities. At the end of the third issue, John realizes that Cole is still alive and that the ray sphere worked. In the final issue of Post Blast, John is following Cole and watching as his powers develop. We briefly see Sasha preparing to get her revenge on Kessler. The series ends as Cole, Zeke, and Trish overlook the burning city, and they watch as Empire City becomes unrecognizable. Post Blast is pretty decent. It adds some characterization to John mostly, but also contextualizes Trish and Cole's relationship a little bit. It's definitely not super necessary, but is a decent filler if you're looking for something else to read. It helps that the art is pretty good as well. The second comic in the Infamous universe is just called Infamous and was published by DC Comics. It was released in March of 2011 and was meant to bridge the gap between Infamous 1 and 2. In the first issue, we see Moya checking in on Kessler's experiments months before the first game. He's been repeatedly exposing these people to the ray sphere to test its powers. We then once again see Cole delivering the ray sphere on that fated day. In the present day, a general is presenting media with a rundown on relief efforts for Empire City, once again spreading propaganda that things are all perfect and fine in there and that no one is dying of hunger. Cole is overseeing Trish's grave, and she looks wildly different for some reason. So does Zeke. He kind of looks like the Giga Chad meme. Don't be afraid of Giga Chad Zeke. He can't hurt you. In the time since the end of Infamous, Cole has befriended a man called Warden Harms, a police officer in Empire City. The two have bonded over their grief. Elsewhere, Moya has captured Alden's body and is experimenting on him. Cole and the Warden end up saving Zeke from some of the First Sons, and we see the fallout from Zeke's betrayal as Cole quickly shrugs him off. The first issue goes a lot further into Zeke and Cole's complicated relationship, how Cole feels about his friend and his betrayal at this point. Meanwhile, some beast has been unleashed upon the city with new powers. He was given a deal by Kessler. If he let Kessler experiment on him, then he would pay off his debt. The beast is now after Cole, believing that he's Kessler. At the beginning of the second issue, Moya and her team are working on neutralizing Sasha. In a conversation with Cole, Zeke reveals what he did with Kessler when he betrayed him. Kessler just kept him in a room for days and eventually thanked him for being such a good friend to him, never intending to give him the powers he promised. Cole is being attacked at this point by the new beast, and Moya is waging a full war against him, trying to capture him and take him in. David eventually tracks Cole down and attacks Zeke. Of course, Cole, even in his anger against his friend, still saves him. Moya ends up having to level a building to stop David for a period. He feeds on neuroelectricity, so their plan is to starve him of it. They still need to bring in Cole though, so they plan to attack his emotions. Cole ends up dreaming of Kessler showing him the graves of his family. Moya and her team hit Cole with hallucinations though, convincing him that he's being spoken to by Trish, and this is enough to finally capture him. Moya tells Cole that he is essentially a walking weapon, and that governments all over the world are trying to get to him. They plan to control him to ensure he doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Sasha ends up helping him break free before they can completely take over his mind. But David is still out there and goes on a rampage to get to Cole. He unknowingly lets loose Kessler's other experiments in the process, though. This results in a massive battle between Cole and David, which sees our hero coming out the victor. Moya seemingly dies in the conflict, and at the end of the series, Cole is contacted by Lucy Quo, leading into the second game. The series is pretty good narratively, though I'm not a big fan of the art at all. There isn't a ton of consistency from panel to panel between faces and designs, but the story is pretty interesting, once again further fleshing out the rift between Zeke and Cole. It also develops Zeke's character so that his transformation in the second game really makes sense. It ends the stories of Moya, Sasha, and Alden so that those loose threads are tied up before the second game. The new villain is pretty unique and has understandable motivations. It even showcases the journalists trying to get into Empire City to see what's really going on. While it is short, it's a decent little adventure that effectively bridges the two stories. But with those stories bridged, let's talk about the second game in the Infamous series. Soon after Infamous 1 was completed, Sucker Punch began developing a sequel. They didn't realize how well the first game would do with the public though, and were surprised once the sales numbers started coming in. The goal with Infamous 2 was to refine everything the first game did, but also to make it bigger and better than Infamous. The city was changed and made more distinct, powers were adjusted and altered, and enemies increased in scale so that we were fighting larger and larger foes. The team was still a similar size at the time, with only 65 to 70 core people working on the sequel. Sucker Punch had a QA staff of about 30 people, meaning that at max, there was only 100 people working on Infamous 2. The team, now familiar with the PlayStation 3's Cell processor, were in a position to utilize the full extent of the platform. This allowed them to generate larger, more detailed environments that were also destructible. The game was initially shown off at E3, and with it, a new reveal. The team had decided to change the voice actor for Cole McGrath, mainly because they wanted to incorporate more motion capture in this entry, and they felt they needed someone that could excel at both voice acting and motion capture. But along with that, they drastically changed Cole's appearance. Fans were very vocal about their dislike for the change, and Sucker Punch listened to this outcry, reverting sequel Cole to the classic look that everyone knew at that point. Infamous 2 was released on June 7th, 2011 in North America, June 8th, 2011 in the EU, June 9th, 2011 in Australia, and June 10th, 2011 in the United Kingdom, all for the Sony PlayStation 3. Like I said before, the name of the game for Infamous 2 was in fact not Infamous 2. It was bigger and better, but it was also about refining everything that the first game introduced. One of the best things that the sequel does in terms of gameplay is that it doesn't strip all of our powers away at the beginning. Sequels love to do this, especially from this era. They have an obsession with resetting the clock with some sort of narrative device and making you reobtain all of the powers you got in the last game. Infamous 2 thankfully avoids this, and Cole is equipped with his full power kit, for the most part, from the first game. Most of the basics in Infamous 2 are the same as the first game. We are equipped with our electric abilities, the basic shot, the shockwave blast, the grenades. The only powers we don't have from the beginning are our Ionic Storm, the Rocket, and the Precision Shot. But most of the progression that we get in the game is iterating on these powers that we already have. The karma system is still in place, and actually, we can carry over our karma from our save from the first game. With every karma level increase, we get access to new powers. These powers are often variations on other powers. We can adjust the regular bolt lightning shot to be a 3-pronged attack, a larger pulse attack, or even a steady stream resembling an assault rifle. Each power has its own variations, which are different depending on whether you play the game good or evil. A lot of these powers require stunts to be completed to unlock them. In the previous games, stunts were essentially in-game achievements that would net us a little bit of experience. These could be anything from hitting an enemy while they were flying in the air to using a melee finisher. Now, these stunts are required to unlock new power variations. Some specific passive upgrades, like faster draining of electricity and such, are locked out under the side mission selection. We have to complete a certain amount of side missions to even unlock these. Side missions are back once again, and in Infamous 2, there are a lot less of the tedious ones than there were in the first game. Defeating enemies, taking pictures of monsters in the city, and taking out supplies from the local boats are just a few of the things that we'll have to do in these quests. These also, just like the last game, will clear out different parts of the city and make them safer. Good and evil specific side missions also make a return in this entry. These specifically are much better than they were before. There's a good exclusive side mission that sees us following a conduit who turns against his brethren, and we have to help him take groups of them out. But in the end, he is overcome with power and we're forced to destroy him. Infamous 2 takes place outside of Empire City, for reasons that we'll get into shortly. The new city, New Marais, takes a lot of inspiration from New Orleans. While it isn't one-to-one, it's meant to invoke the spirit of the city. The environment is improved in 2 large ways. The first is that the traversal is greatly improved. I noted in my review of the first game that the traversal just had a lot of kinks that needed to be ironed out. Most of those wrinkles have been turned smooth in the sequel, and climbing up buildings is a lot easier than it was before. There's also a larger amount of grind wires placed around the city, meaning that staying on the rooftops is easier than it was, so we don't even need to climb as much as before. We also get an upgrade to our levitation powers later in the game, and we're able to go a lot further. The other big change is that the areas of the city are largely distinct from each other. The main area of the city that we start in feels like the part of New Orleans that tourists would access. Large blocks of businesses attracting local and out-of-town attention. The slums is just next to this area, largely run down and marked with larger monuments like the Civil War outpost on the east end of the city or the graveyard in its center. Flood Town is a district that is completely covered in water, outside of the areas that haven't yet been submerged and the few buildings sticking out of the flood. The final area, the gasworks, is completely industrial. Massive warehouses, factory buildings, and huge gas tankers dot the landscape. This makes each section of the game feel unique and fresh. While I'm not a big fan of the Flood Town part of the game, it does feel wildly different, whereas Empire City sort of all blends together. We can collect dead drops once again, this time from flying carrier pigeons instead of satellites placed around the city. And blast shards make their return as well, once again increasing the amount of battery cores that we have access to in combat. The most important improvement that Infamous 2 makes to its gameplay is just that most everything feels better. It feels better to shoot enemies. It feels better to get up close and personal. It feels better to move around the city, to explore, to collect. Everything has been turned up a notch with respect to scale. The world feels larger, and the powers do as well. Every idea that Infamous 1 was trying to implement is taken another step further in its sequel. The systems have not inched forward on their journey to fruition, they have lurched, nearly reaching their destination. For example, in Infamous 1, there was a stark difference between playing evil and good morality. When I was playing the good side, I genuinely made an effort to make precise shots, to take my time and to ensure minimal casualties to bystanders. But when I was playing evil, this was not a concern of mine. In fact, the powers themselves reflect this. Infamous 2 ratchets this up. Nearly every power and upgrade that you get on the evil side gives them a wider spread. The grenades become cluster bombs. Your shots chain to anyone in the vicinity, and you are actively rewarded for taking out bystanders with extra experience and more evil morality. In addition to side missions, the sequel introduces these emergent activities. These are all split among good and evil morality. If you're following the good path, then you'll be taking out muggers and defusing blast shard bombs around the city. If you're following the evil path, then you'll be taking out cops and street performers on the side of the road. The evil side in Infamous 2 is sometimes needlessly cruel, and the game as a whole does have a morality problem that we'll get into shortly. Speaking of morality, let's talk about the story of Infamous 2. The game begins with a brief recap of the first game's story, reusing some of the motion comic panels from that game. After the events in Empire City, Cole is contacted by a woman named Lucy Quo. She is here to help him prepare for his coming rival, the thing he was gaining strength for this entire time, the Beast. A friend, Dr. Wolf, worked on the Raysphere prototype and can amplify Cole's powers, so we have to head down to New Marais with her, located in the south. Cole and Zeke are getting ready to leave Empire City, but before they can head out, the Beast shows up. We get a short tutorial section where we fight against the Beast, but Cole isn't strong enough yet to take it down. He's absolutely decimated in the fight, and Empire City is wiped off the map. On the trip to New Marais, Cole is dealing with his failure, his inability to protect the city that he knew and loved, and Zeke is trying to get back into his good graces through whatever means necessary. The group gets to New Marais, and we suddenly have a ticking clock. The game will consistently remind us throughout it the distance left on the Beast's journey south. It's the time that's running out. It's the water draining from the sink. It's the final confrontation, slowly moving its way towards us. It adds urgency to the narrative and something to prepare for. Arriving outside the city, we find it under a blockade by a local militia. We have to infiltrate the city through the swamps, and on our way in, our first morality choice. Do we charge the engine of the bridge properly, or do we overload it and destroy the local militia, as well as a small village of innocent men, women, children, and pets? If you're evil, then Cole is already committing war crimes before he's even reached the city proper. On our way in, we can see a propaganda ad on the TV from the local militia's leader, Bertrand. It sets the stage for New Marais and one of the main antagonists that we'll have to face soon. Getting into the city, Zeke and Cole briefly reminisce on their time here. Cole was practicing his parkour because the city was flooded and mostly lawless. Not sure why you would travel 1,300 miles to practice parkour, but okay. Quo and Cole quickly head through the city to look for Dr. Wolf, but his lab has been taken over by the militia and they stole his blast core. We can take out the militia and find it nearby, but Wolf is attacked. We can save him, and he tells us that he knew Kessler. He worked with him in the beginning on the Raysphere. He has a device that looks like a Raysphere, but isn't one. It's described as an anti-Raysphere, the RFI, or Ray Field Inhibitor. It takes powers away from those around it, so we might be able to use it to drain the Beast. The blast core that we've gained will also increase Cole's powers, while charging the RFI. We need 6 more to charge it fully, but every time Cole uses one, it knocks him out for a few hours. This ticks the clock down just a bit further as the Beast gets closer and closer. With this blast core, we're given the kinetic pulse ability, which we can use to pick up objects and throw them at enemies. I very rarely use this ability in-game, mostly because the other abilities that you can map to the R2 button later in the game are much more effective. After this, Quo starts tracking the people that took Wolf since he was captured while we slept. Quo sends us to go salvage some stuff from his lab, and this is where we're introduced to the carrier pigeon dead drops and blast shards. Quo also lets us know that she and John from the first game worked together briefly. They were both sent to infiltrate the First Sons, with her heading to New Marais and with him heading to Empire City. Zeke then calls us to go help some old friends. On the way over, we'll start seeing more news broadcasts, and the powers that be are already doing their work to shape the story and warp it for public perception. Helping Zeke really means selecting one of 2 missions, a good or an evil one. The good one sends us over to a local mansion to save some hostages and restrain some militia members. The evil one sends us to attack some militia spies and take them out. By now, Quo still hasn't found Wolf, so Cole decides to head straight to the top. We have to head to Bertrand, who's giving a speech tonight, and grab him to find out where they're keeping Wolf. Bertrand has already started a witch hunt against Cole, who he calls the Electric Man. He is also running a rampant campaign against any and all deviants in the city, assumingly whatever that means to him and his men at any time. And he uses his fine young masked men to dole out his orders. That doesn't seem familiar at all. Bertrand's militia is also at war with monsters, though, and these monsters quickly attack the rally. These are the Corrupted, and we'll learn more about them as the game goes on, but they present an interesting new hurdle for us in terms of gameplay. They are mostly melee enemies, so they close the distance and then attack. We can deal with them on their terms or try to take them out before they even get within swinging range. After dealing with the monsters, we track down Bertrand and his limo. Cole is knocked off the limo before we can get him, though, and we're forced to take out a chopper as Bertrand gets away. Quo then contacts us with a lead on Wolf. We have to tail his interrogator back to a safe house. When we're taking out the nearby enemy militia, we encounter another new monster, a Ravager. They are these super annoying enemies that have to be attacked with explosions, as bolts won't do any damage. In fact, most of the mini-boss enemies in this game are kind of terrible. After this, Quo drives a truck and we stand on the back, chasing down Wolf and his captors. We eventually get into a head-on collision with the truck, though. The militia ends up capturing Quo, and now we're really screwed. At this point, Cole has a pretty bleak outlook. Nothing has been going good since we got to New Marais. We can't get Wolf back, Quo is gone, and we have no lead on the blast cores that we need to stop the beast. Zeke tries to bring him back up, though, by immediately finding out where the militia is holding Quo. We have to search around the shacks in the swampland, and we eventually come across another conduit in the fog. This is Nyx, and she has teleportation and tar powers. She has a blast core, but wants us to come help her cause some mischief before she gives it to us. We have to burn the flags at a militia camp, and then she gives it to us. Cole uses it back under Zeke's supervision, and we gain the Ionic Vortex ability, which is a variation of our Ion Storm from the first game. Instead of calling down a huge storm, we can send a tornado in a long line towards enemies. And this was honestly, on the other side of the kinetic pulse, one of the most useful powers in the entire game for me. It's also incredibly satisfying and speaks to the scale that Infamous 2 was trying to achieve. Within the first act of the game, we're already sending massive storms at our enemies, and things will only grow from here. After this, Zeke has figured out a location that Quo might be held at. It's an old cane plantation, and we have to infiltrate it. We have two choices here. The evil choice is to ram a massive truck full of explosives through the front door, but in turn, the people locked up there might burn up. The good choice is to free some captured police officers and turn them onto our side, gathering a force of rebels that want to stand up against the militia. Now, Infamous 2 changes a lot of things, but one of its larger adjustments is in that of the morality narrative. In the first game, we mostly had choices that played on the public perception of Cole. The city was a character, and either choice was a likely response that someone would make in the situation that they were in. They weren't necessarily always reasonable, but you could certainly see people making these decisions. In Infamous 2, the evil storyline is almost always needlessly cruel. Now, this does a few things. On one hand, it leans more into the evil power fantasy that the first game set up. It leads you down a path of becoming a pure supervillain, but mostly without a good reason why. The answer to that question is generally, well, it would be easier, or who cares, let's just kill some people. The moral choices at the end of the game do add some more subtlety, but it's as if Infamous 2 is a scaled mirror to Infamous 1, where in the first game, the ratio of mustache-twirling villain choices to genuine moral dilemmas was about 20-80. It's now flipped to the other side. But that's not really addressing the elephant in the room, the characters and how their opinions are impacted by these choices. If we decide to free the police, Nyx is upset because of her distrust of authority. And if we decide to ram a truck full of explosives into the building, Zeke is upset because of our wanton destruction. Infamous 2 trades in the motivation of public perception for the individual, and just like anything, sometimes it works and other times it doesn't. It's a different flavor, certainly not tipping the scale wholly good or bad either way. Both approaches to morality and narrative have their applications. Certainly the public perception motivator was more applicable to the first game because it was an origin story. Cole was fighting for his city, and his karma was a reflection of the public's opinion at large. In Infamous 2, Cole has almost no attachment to New Marais outside of some parkour trips and partying with Zeke. So the only people that Cole can attach himself to here are the individuals that he knows: Quo, Nix, and most importantly, Zeke. Either mission that we choose sees us successfully infiltrating the plantation and finding Quo, hidden in an underground warehouse full of experiments. Quo herself has been experimented on, but freeing our ally also means freeing all of these prototype conduits. We successfully make the escape and get another district of New Marais back online. Shortly after this, we end up freeing a woman tied up in the swamp, about to be sacrificed to something. Turns out she has connections to some rebel group. Her uncle is an important man in the organization named LaRoche. In saving him, we're put up against a large beast called a Devourer. After this, Quo has recuperated and meets us in the graveyard. The experiments that were done on her have now given her powers, specifically of the ice variety. Quo is not really taking the whole thing well and is mostly upset that she had this forced on her. Cole is just kind of a straight up dick in this scene for some reason though. I mean, it's important that Quo controls her powers, but like, she just got them. You could give her a little bit of time, maybe.
You care.
Ow, damn it!
I'm really sorry. I don't.
You've got to learn how to control your powers.
The two eventually do bond over their shared abilities and find a blast core in the graveyard. When fighting with either Quo or Nix, we will be able to make use of their abilities. With Quo, we can shoot her rays to freeze enemies, and with Nix, we can shoot enemies that she's grappled to explode them into a million pieces. Quo leaves the mission feeling a bit better, and Cole heads off with his blast core to charge the RFI. This is where we get improved static thrusters and the precision bolt. We meet up with Nix next, where we learn more about her past. She grew up in poverty in the swamp. She wants to show Cole what happened to her family, so we ride a militia boat through the swamps, and eventually Nix shows us a massive crater in the earth. Just like Empire City, except Bertrand was behind the explosion. He gathered a group of people who could die without anyone noticing, and set off the blast core in the middle of the swamp. Nix's family was a part of this, killed by Bertrand in the pursuit of power, but Nix gained abilities in this blast, too. Back at the rooftop apartment, Zeke calls a meeting. He's found the transfer device, essentially the equipment that Bertrand is using to give people powers. There's already an argument between Quo and Nix. Nix wants to use the machine to steal powers from others, and Quo wants to destroy the machine so it can't be used again. We then have another moral quandary. We need to assault the militia encampment. We can either find medicine for the rebels that will get them on our side to help us with the assault, or we can side with Nix and have her dress up as the militia, killing rebels, which will result in a force angry enough to storm the base. It's actually a super fucked up thing to do. Incredibly manipulative. Either protecting an ambulance or faking a rebel attack, LaRoche's men are ready to help. We storm the base and take out the men inside. The transfer device has a blast core, but Cole wants to use the device to swap powers with either Nix or Quo. Once again, another choice we have to make. They're both very adamant about the fact that they will not support Cole if he doesn't choose them, but they still do, sort of. This is a pretty big decision, not only because it's good versus evil, red versus blue, Nix versus Quo, but it also determines the new type of powers that we'll get. Siding with evil allows us to unlock more of the tar powers in the later game, and siding with Quo gives us more of the frost abilities down the line. The other side of this, though, is that the other person gets very upset and leaves for now. But since Cole is using a blast core, he is sapped of his energy and is forced to take a little nap, during which Bertrand is allowed to escape. Whoever we decided to side with takes off after the chopper. We find the chopper downed in the city, but Bertrand is nowhere to be found, just a giant monster terrorizing the streets of New Marais. We have to attack its purple nodules located on the inside of its chest, its 2 legs, and its mouth. Destroying the beast, the city is covered in a fog of toxic gas. Cole is the only one able to notice that Bertrand was the monster as he transforms back into his human form. At this point, we bring Floodtown online, the next district in New Marais. Floodtown is a pretty distinct area for multiple reasons. First of all, it's covered in water that makes traversing here a bit more difficult than in the city. Falling off a building doesn't just mean hitting the ground and being forced to climb up, it means taking damage and possibly dying. But on the other side of that coin, shocking enemies in the water is a far easier way to take them out. In Floodtown, we're also introduced to a new enemy type, the conduits. These are the experiments that were released from Bertrand's lab. They are a lot faster than the regular militia enemies and even the swamp monsters that we've been fighting. They also have cold powers, allowing them to jump into the air, attack us with cold beams, and even launch frost projectiles at us. It's a massive shakeup in terms of gameplay. My only problem with these things is that they are both distinct challenges with unique methods of approach required by the player, but they're delivered to us at the same time, meaning that Floodtown often gets a bad rap because of where it's sandwiched in the overall progression. It also makes traversal just not as fun to have water underneath us. Exploration should be rewarding, and in the city, it's generally a thoughtless task. But with the new environmental factors, we're forced to consider next moves. I don't think Floodtown is horrible, it's just probably my least favorite area in the game. Arriving in the new district, we're given a toy to play with. Zeke and LaRoche have put together something the former has coined the Dunbar Beam. It's a UV spotlight that takes out enemies just by shining it on them. After defending some civilians from groups of monsters and fighting off a new type of conduit, we learn that LaRoche and his rebels have a blast core in their possession. They want a favor completed before they'll give it to us, though. This involves capping off some active fires in the area. They only have one cap though, which means we need to use kinetic blast to carry or shoot the thing across the different parts of the district. While I like the idea of this mission, its implementation is just really clunky. The cap often lands in the water, which is fine because the developers prepared for this situation. You can just stand on the cap and use kinetic blast, but then you end up falling in the water, which, even though it's probably not going to kill you, just doesn't feel smooth at all. The cap also doesn't often interact with the flames right, so it's pretty common to overshoot and then have to run and grab the cap again. During this mission, we find Bertrand doing some sort of experiment with the swamp monsters. Heading back to the new hideout, Quo tells us she found a journal from Dr. Wolf's lab. He initially created the RFI to cure the plague, the disease that's been running rampant through the city, assumingly turning people into these monsters. But the plague itself, we learn, is caused by the Rayfield radiation, meaning that the blast caused the plague in the first place, and probably did the same for Empire City. But hopefully, charging up the RFI enough will be able to cure the plague anyways. Cole uses another blast core at this point, meaning we only need 2 more before the device can be used, but the beast is getting closer and closer. After this, Quo tells the group that Bertrand has been observed making regular visits to the train yard. Nick says this is because Bertrand is creating and controlling the monsters. She reveals that anyone can control the monsters. She actually has one of her own that follows her orders. At this point, Quo wants to collect evidence to prove that Bertrand is making the monsters and turn the city against him, but Nix wants to control the monsters and use the Force to take Bertrand out. Of course, your choice here once again determines which mission you will take on, either protecting Nix while she turns the monsters on your side, or taking pictures of the facility and sneaking inside. We can see Bertrand creating the monsters in the good version of this mission. In this side of the mission, Nix turns the monsters anyways and defies the group. After this, Zeke reveals that he's been spying on the militia and found out that Bertrand had developed a last-ditch effort to destroy the beast. It's a massive nuke that Zeke has stolen and plans to use on the beast while it's far enough away from the city to prevent any large casualties. We launch the thing and it directly hits the beast, but while trying to get Zeke out of the rubble, it's revealed that the beast only absorbed the power of the nuke. Cole and Zeke are launched from the blast site, and the beast is now officially in New Marais. At this point, we can bring the gasworks online, the new industrial district of New Marais. Bertrand traps Cole in a cage here, and we have no way to attack the enemies shooting us. Bertrand wants Cole to work with him to stop the beast. Of course, Cole denies his offer. We just have to survive, and eventually Zeke comes to save him. Zeke and Cole finally have their emotional resolution here. Zeke, just like the first game, is a pretty complicated character, and he will continue to be so throughout the end of the game. In the first game, he represented a moral gray, and the ending of Infamous's narrative left Zeke in a sort of no man's land. He had completely betrayed Cole in that game, but tried to help him with Kessler in the finale. Cole makes a lot of references to Zeke's previous misdeeds in this game, and to the fact that he doesn't know how to feel about them. Cole is very much still processing this betrayal, but he isn't exactly treating Zeke with kid's gloves. It's almost like he's waiting for him to slip up again. Zeke is trying as hard as he can to get back in Cole's good graces. The whole first half of the story is Zeke's redemption to Cole, and Infamous 2 makes him into far less of an opportunist than he was before. Maybe something shook him awake. Maybe it was the reality of Kessler's reveal. Maybe it was the destruction of Empire City. Maybe it was the realization of what he had done to someone that he calls friend. Regardless, Zeke is doing everything he can to make up for his past. He's trying to save Cole at every opportunity, and doing a damn good job this time. The nuke plan itself was genius, and even though it didn't work, it was a good effort from someone who clearly cares. But this sequence brings that emotional tension to its full resolution. Cole forgives Zeke for the way that he's been acting, and Zeke isn't quick to rake Cole over the coals here for it. He recognizes that he did wrong and understands. Basically, I say this to all mean that the boys are back together again. The next mission sees us looking for another blast core among Bertrand's warehouses. We search through a few and eventually have to face off against a new conduit enemy, the Titan. These are incredibly annoying because they only take damage on their arms, and we have to destroy both, which can regenerate, by the way, before we can pry off its face and reveal its weak spot. A lot of the mini-bosses in this game just really slow down the pace of the combat with the needless mechanics. I think their designs are mostly interesting, but they are mechanically pretty bland. The first few times you fight them, some intrigue is present, but after the 5th or 6th, they become a tedious chore that needlessly lengthens combat encounters for seemingly no reason. Inside of the safe, we find a blast core and a briefcase full of documents on Bertrand. He wasn't creating the conduits to just destroy the beast and protect the city, but to sell as weapons all over the world. Cole wonders about his real motivations because he donates most of his money, so Cole wonders if there's a missing piece to this whole arrangement. Cole and Zeke then hang out back at the rooftop for a while in a quaint little scene. Cole then uses his newest blast core to gain the lightning tether ability, which lets him lash himself to buildings and fly all over the place. It's actually probably one of the most fun powers in the entire game. The next plan is to go sabotage the boats that Bertrand has in the harbor, ready to ship conduits all over the world. Once we do this, Cole is greeted by a ghost, John. We thought he died back in the Ray Sphere blast, but apparently he turned into a conduit. He takes us across the city, granting us a new ability to see the plague inside of people's bodies. We can also see who are potential conduits, and he has us heal one in the plague ward. John reveals that he has the power to save all of the conduits, also showing off the fact that he is the beast in the process. Before we can resolve the John Beast problem, we need to take out Bertrand, who is waiting for a chopper that Zeke has already sabotaged. It's here that he reveals his motivations. He wants to wipe out all conduits, and he's only unleashed them because he wants people to see how evil they can truly be. Bertrand then turns into the massive monster once again. We have a huge boss fight with him where we lure him across the gasworks, and Zeke and LaRoche use their men to trap him, shooting missiles into his carapace. We eventually take him out once and for all. Zeke has a lead on one more blast core, the final one that we need to charge the device. During this scene, Zeke reveals that he has the plague too, and he doesn't have much time. We have to chase down the conduit with the blast core. During this section, we're fighting in a massive storm, one which we can draw power from at any time, which is honestly incredibly fun. Cole uses his final blast core here, finally gaining enough energy to use the RFI. Quo and Nix are here, and Cole fills them in on the situation with John. He tries to use the RFI, but it starts hurting him, Quo, and Nix, so Zeke stops it before the device can activate. Because Zeke hit the RFI, it needs a bit more charge, but we have a bigger problem, a massive decision that we need to make. So Nix has sided against the beast because he's been killing her monsters, or her babies, as she calls them. But Quo is against the beast. Siding with Nyx means we're siding against John, against the Beast. We are deciding to charge the RFI to actually use it, which cures the plague, defeats the Beast, but also wipes out all conduits in turn, which means Quo, Nyx, and Cole will all die. Siding with Quo means that we side with the Beast and that we use his powers to save all of the conduits, but in the process, killing the human population and not curing the plague. It's pretty obvious here which is the evil one and which is the good one, but the interesting thing is how the players in this game have switched sides. Nyx has always been the sort of evil karma character. Siding with her has always led us down the evil path, and Quo has always led us down the good path. But now, because Quo is afraid of death and has just learned to enjoy her powers, she wants to save the conduits. And because the Beast has murdered Nyx's babies, she wants to save the humans and go out in a blaze of glory. It's a very interesting choice for a game based on moral decision, because heading down one path endears you to one character and sort of leaves the other in the dust. But the game asks a question of the player. Can you continue to make these moral decisions, even if not supported by the individual? Were you making these decisions because you thought it was the right thing to do, or was it just because you liked the character who agreed with you? There's also the Zeke problem at play here. Zeke obviously wants us to save humanity. It's the right thing to do after all, so he's found himself siding with Nyx. This choice results in two wildly different endings and wildly different ending missions. So let's start with the good one. In the good mission, we side with Nyx, and Zeke tells us how to recharge the RFI, and he tells Cole goodbye, because he knows that they won't get the chance later. We have to face off against the Beast multiple times here and charge the RFI at the same time. Interestingly though, during this battle, Quo joins the Beast, and we have to fight her as well. Nyx sacrifices herself to stun the Beast and give us enough time to get to the cathedral. We take him out, and Quo eventually comes back to Cole, apologizing and revealing that she was just scared in this very emotional scene. This is once again an extension of the idea that the team introduced in the first Infamous game. The burden of powers, the burden of the superhero, is far too much to ask one person to take. Quo was just given powers against her will. She hasn't even fully figured them out yet, and to expect that she would bravely sacrifice herself is unrealistic.
I am scared.
I am too.
Do it. Do it.
Tears, anger, and fear is a far more reasonable response to the realization that you might die to save millions. Cole then uses the ray sphere, taking out the Beast, the monsters, the conduits, Quo, and himself in the process. The final scene sees Zeke as the narrator. The plague was successfully cured, and Cole was made a patron saint of the city, their savior, their superhero. Zeke gives him a burial at sea as the game ends. If we side with Quo, then Nyx runs off with the RFI, and Zeke makes it very clear that Cole and he are enemies. Quo and Cole meet John on the docks. Quo heads off to find Zeke after he cuts power to the city. We rampage through the streets with John. Just being around him allows us to constantly levitate and regenerate cores. We have to fight Nyx many times on the way to the cathedral. Once we get there, Cole kills Nyx with the melee weapon that Zeke made him, and Zeke arrives, gun in hand, ready to take on Cole by himself. He, of course, isn't enough to stand against him, but he has to try. It's easy to take out random passerbys on the street, especially in the heat of battle. It's easy to side with Nyx for most of the game and have fun rampaging against the cops and the militia. It might even be easy to side with Quo at the end of the game, but it damn sure isn't easy to kill Zeke as he valiantly tries to rise up against us. This is the true redemption for Zeke as well. The roles are reversed here. Zeke is now the one upholding a standard of morality. He knows what the right decision is, and while he's still betraying Cole, just like he did last time, he isn't wrong for doing so. Colt kills Zeke and destroys the RFI. John then decides that he suddenly doesn't want to live anymore. He transfers his powers to Cole, who then becomes the Beast and activates conduits around the world. Cole then leads an army all over the planet to purge it of the plague as the Beast that he was meant to destroy. Something that I haven't noted yet is that the first two Infamous games both have canonically good endings. This is because Sucker Punch noticed that most people had chosen the good ending on their playthroughs, and decided to make the most popular choice the canonical one. That being said, I'm honestly not sure which ending I like more in Infamous 2, because they're both fantastic. One is Cole seeing his karmic path fulfilled, doing the most heroic thing that a superhero can do, sacrifice themselves for the greater good. If Infamous 1 was Sucker Punch's Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, then Infamous 2, at least the good side, is their Dark Knight Rises. And the other path is the full redemption of Zeke, and closes the full loop of the Beast and Kessler's confrontation, merging them essentially into one being. It had been a while since I had played Infamous 2, and going into this series I saw a lot of people saying the franchise peaked with the first game, but honestly, there's not a lot to dislike about the sequel. The environments are improved, the gameplay is, at its best, in most ways, infinitely better than the first. Infamous 2 just feels so good to play. It feels like the pinnacle of what the team wanted to achieve, at least on this console. The narrative is great in some ways. It succeeds at achieving a new level of moral complication. The choices that it asks us to make, especially at the end of the game, are difficult ones. But the series has clearly moved away from the quote-unquote realism that the first game was steeped in. Even the introduction of the monsters makes this clear. A grounded origin story followed by a fantastical sequel. But I mostly don't have a problem with this because it's in service of introducing a wider world and upping the stakes for Cole and his character. If there's one thing I don't enjoy about the sequel, it's Bertrand's character. While he is a good villain, for the majority of the story, the game can't really tell whether it wants us to focus on the Beast or him as its primary antagonist. Having two is fine. Hell, Infamous even technically had three, but it feels as if there's so much focus put on Bertrand for what is ultimately not that interesting of a payoff. His warped worldview certainly didn't interest me enough to keep me engaged. The game shines in its other characters, though. The cast of Nyx, Quo, Zeke, John, and Cole is much better than the previous entry's characters. These people feel fleshed out, they feel genuine, and they are mostly reflections of what normal people given godlike powers would be going through. Nyx is grasping at anything to fill the void she finds inside of her. Without a real family to rely on, she creates a new one out of humans turned warped swamp creatures. Quo struggles with the change in life, wanting to go back to some sense of normalcy. Straddled with responsibility that she didn't ask for, she acts on fear. And Cole is, well, whatever you want him to be. He's either jaded and angered from his time in Empire City, ready to enact the wanton destruction that Nyx desires and take over ruling the world with the Beast's power, or he's a martyr, one that takes on the pain that he feels he caused with the race fear in Empire City. He understands that he's culpable in some way, and feels that the only way he can make up for that is by offering his own life. Zeke is a man in search of friendship in a broken world, a world that he no longer recognizes. He yearns for the days when his brother would sit on the couch with him and watch cartoons, and if saving the world is a way back to that, then so be it. Reluctance is the clear through line here. No one asked for this. Just like Cole didn't ask to be burdened with the responsibility of an entire city in the first game, none of these people wanted to be here, but they are. And it's about the decisions that you make in those situations that make you hero or villain. Infamous 2 was a success with critics, currently standing at an 83 out of 100 on Metacritic. It sold 369,000 units in its first month of release, only really beat out on the charts by LA Noire, which had just released a few weeks earlier. The Infamous series was incredibly successful at this point, reaching new heights for Sucker Punch, far surpassing their previous series. But the team wasn't done with the franchise just yet. Before we talk about the last Infamous game, we should probably take a non-canonical side road here to talk about Infamous Festival of Blood, a separate and short adventure that was released after Infamous 2. Infamous Festival of Blood was released on October 25th, 2011 in North America and on October 26th, 2011 in the EU, both for the PlayStation 3. Festival of Blood takes place within a supposedly fictional story that Zeke is telling a woman at a bar. He's trying to impress her by drudging up a tale about his friend Cole so that he can hopefully take her home. While I would call Festival of Blood a DLC because it was released on the framework of Infamous 2, it's actually technically a standalone entry, and buying it requires a PSN download that is separate from the base game. In the story of the game, Cole and Zeke are taking part in the Pyre Night, an annual event in New Marais where the citizens party and burn pyres and all that good stuff. Cole ventures into the local cathedral on Pyre Night to rescue some people in trouble. Down there, he is bitten by a vampire called Bloody Mary. She's trying to take him for her vampire army, to use him as a weapon, and in turn exert her control over the world. If Cole doesn't figure out some way to stop this before sunrise, then he will lose all ability to fight her off and become her thrall. That's what most of the game is about, seeking out a weapon that can destroy Mother Mary before sunrise, and the hours left in the night replaces the ticking clock that was how far the beast was from New Marais. Everything in Festival of Blood, though, is built off the same framework that was used for Infamous 2. It's the same city, the same control scheme, mostly the same UI. We are fighting different enemies this time around, though, in that of vampires. Humanoid enemies that can sometimes teleport to different locations, and that often shoot at us with projectiles. Vampires can be staked once they are downed, though, causing them to experience a sort of true death. Staking certain amounts of vampires will give us new powers, replacing the experience system from the base game. The powers we gain, though, are fixed, meaning that we are not allowed to choose to upgrade any particular ability. We do fight one unique monster in the game, the Firstborn. They're a mini-boss type enemy that resemble a very large, traditional bat-like vampire. There's also a lack of karma in this standalone entry, the only exception being that when the game starts, Cole has blue karma, and then when he gets turned, his karma changes to red, but we can't really do anything in the game to change it. It's mostly a linear tale. Cole does gain one new mechanic and ability. He can drain humans to gain blood, and this blood can then be used to transform into a swarm of bats and fly around the city. It's actually a pretty fun traversal mechanic and scales the city down quite a bit so that most of our time in this relatively short adventure isn't scaling buildings and trying to get from point A to point B. The story itself is pretty simple and pulpy. Bloody Mary was a governess in Europe that was turned when she was on her deathbed with smallpox. She ran rampant across Europe, killing as many as she could. The priest that stayed with her on her deathbed, Father Ignatius, never gave up hope in her though. Ignatius eventually killed the vampire that turned Mary, hoping it would revert her back to a human state, but it only enraged her further. She chased Ignatius for decades, eventually finding him in New Marais, where he rallied the people against her. She was captured and burned on a pyre, but once again this only further angered her. The only reason that Ignatius could subdue her in the first place was because of his barbed cross. This is the item that we spend most of the game trying to find, and it eventually replaces our melee weapon. Using it on vampires kills them in one hit rather than 3. We eventually have a final face-off with Mary in the cathedral. We defend Zeke as he plants bombs on the struts and weakens Mary. Cole tries to escape the church before the bombs detonate, but sunlight makes his ascent difficult. As the bombs explode, though, Cole is turned back into a human and the vampires are destroyed. Back in the present, Zeke is finishing his story as Cole arrives to get some assistance from his friend. Cole inadvertently ends up taking Zeke's girl, though, and as the two leave, she's revealed to be a genuine vampire. Festival of Blood is a pretty fun little offshoot. You definitely won't get a ton of time out of it, and even trying to get all of the trophies like finding Mother Mary's glyphs and feeding on 100 people will only maybe get you a maximum 3 or 4 hours. But it's a decent little adventure, and I like the Infamous 2 gameplay enough to go back even for a non-canonical one-off. The game itself was very successful, debuting at the #1 most downloaded game on the PlayStation Network. At the time, it was even the fastest selling PlayStation 3 downloadable game. But this was clearly just a stepping stone, a small morsel to keep the fans quelled, because Sucker Punch was developing an entirely new entry in the series that would have to wait for the next generation. Infamous Second Son began development quickly after the release of the second game. Wanting to honor players' choices, just like the first game, the team decided to make the good ending canon, which meant that canonically, Cole sacrificed himself for humanity. This meant that they would need a new protagonist, and ideally, a new setting for the game. The team chose to stage Second Son in Seattle, because that's where the Sucker Punch team was located. Since they knew the city well, they figured it would make a good foundation for creating an open world that would honor the town. When development began on the game, console generations were moving once again, and the PlayStation 4 was set to release in November of 2013. Sucker Punch utilized the increased hardware capabilities of the new system and found it much easier to develop for in general. They likened the PlayStation 4 to developing for a PC rather than a console, and were able to utilize the hardware fully from the get-go. With the success of Infamous 2 and its motion capture pipeline, they decided to double down on motion capture and visual effects for the new entry. They even worked with a third-party studio, Digital Domain, to create more immersive effects for the game. Infamous Second Son was first announced at a press conference held by Sony to reveal the PlayStation 4. It was then further demoed at E3 2013. Infamous Second Son released on March 21st, 2014 for the Sony PlayStation 4. With a new system, new protagonist, new setting, and new story, a lot has changed with Infamous Second Son. The abstract is much the same though. We do play a conduit character who has superpowers. We still make moral choices that affect the story and our karma. We still upgrade those powers over time, and the genesis of the story is still there. What will people do when given superpowers? The DNA is the same. It's all the details, the skin, the organs, the blood, that's different this time around. Second Son sees us playing a character named Delson Rowe, a young Native American graffiti artist who doesn't have much going on in his life. That is, until he has responsibility thrust upon him with the powers of smoke manipulation. That's right, since we aren't playing Cole McGrath, our main powers aren't about electricity anymore, and there are a lot of differences when it comes to the element that we're using to save or destroy. Delson's two main abilities at the beginning of the game are his ranged attack and his charged shot. Controls have changed slightly. The fire button has gone from the R1 button to the R2 button, a change that became sort of standard with the new console generation. The regular smoke shot does small bits of damage with each shot, and the charged shot is a bit more powerful, but very close range, more akin to a shotgun. Delson will eventually also get the ability to launch smoke rockets, very similar to the electric rockets that Cole could use. He can also throw a smoke bomb that will choke those in the vicinity and enable Delson to get close and subdue them or kill them. And this time around, replacing the ionic abilities from the previous two entries are karmic powers. These abilities can only be used once the karmic meter is full. To do this, you need to complete karmic actions. If you're taking the good path, then you need to subdue people to fill the meter or heal folks that are in danger. If you're on the evil side, you need to kill to fill it. With a full karmic meter, you can pull off an orbital drop, a massive attack that decimates anyone caught in its wide net. Traversal is a lot different in Second Son as well. Instead of just having the hover ability that we did before, Delson can now pull off a smoke dash, allowing him to teleport horizontally in the air and even pass through objects in front of him. He can also use this to pass through vents on buildings, giving him some verticality. This increased traversal is something I really wanted in the previous games and was always something that slowed them down. Sort of giving the player the ability to go wherever they want not only makes them feel stronger, but also quickens the pace of the game. This will increase even further later in the game, but my biggest complaint with this entry is probably the way that it treats power usage and capacity. In the previous games, you had battery cores that determined how much electricity you had at your disposal. Now, there's just a static bar at the bottom of the screen. We can upgrade this later in the game when we get blast shards, just like previously, but now we have a set amount of rockets that we can launch. The problem with this system is twofold. First of all, this bar drains with even our regular shots, so when we run out of capacity, we have nothing to fall back on in combat. The second game did this as well, but it wasn't as big of an issue because the entire city was covered in electricity. You could easily recharge your cores nearby and just start shooting again. Since we're using smoke instead of electricity this time around, that means there's far less smoke nearby to drain from. There isn't smoke every 2 feet as a part of the city. The only places that we can drain from are vents, cars that have been damaged, and smoke bombs tossed at us. This, especially in the beginning, slows combat down a lot. Gameplay feel is just also a lot heavier, meaning that we get shot easier and take damage more generally. And it seems like across the board, it's always in your favor to stand back and take shots from afar so that you can get cover easily. This was probably your best bet in the first 2 games as well, but because of enemy types, attacks, and stuns, it just feels like you need to be back away from enemies to get anything done. And this once again just feels like it slows gameplay down quite a lot. Outside of that though, most of the changes are incredibly fun, and the weighty system adds heft to our shots. A lot of the heavy lifting here is being done by the sound design. You can hear the tufts of smoke being shot out every time you press the fire button. You can almost feel it. But the biggest change in Infamous Second Son is not the fundamentals, but in the variety of powers that you can get. Delsin starts out with smoke powers, but throughout the story he'll gain access to technically 3 other power sets: Neon, Video, and Concrete. Neon is gained pretty early on in the game and is easily the best set of powers in this entry. Once we gain Neon abilities, we gain the option to switch between Neon and Smoke at any time. The way we do this is by draining power from an environmental source, either Neon or Smoke, and then we switch to that power set. But we can't use both powers at once. The Neon power set has regular ranged attacks, a charged sort of ranged rocket shot, and an ultimate ability that blasts enemies in our area. The main attack, though, is a bit different from the Smoke set. It favors less attacks, but shots that do more damage. Neon is incredibly powerful, though, because of its precision and traversal. If we zoom in with our normal attacks, time will slow down for a brief period, allowing us to focus on our target. We also can either shoot highlighted spots on the enemy's leg to subdue them, or their head to kill them, both giving us the respective karma. This is extremely useful in combat, and if we hit the target, it's a one-shot kill, which is harder to achieve with the other power sets. Neon also has a great traversal mechanic. The smoke dash is replaced with a light run that allows us to travel up the side of buildings. We eventually can upgrade this so that we can run infinitely. I used Neon for most of the game after I got it because it was just so useful in almost every situation. Video is obtained a bit later into this entry and favors stealth for the most part. We can go invisible and take enemies out from behind. We have a steady stream for a main attack instead of larger bolts. We can hover in the air, and we can summon a giant procession of angels to attack our targets. This toolset was definitely more useful than Smoke, but less useful than Neon. Its traversal wasn't as great, though you can bound across the city by flying into satellite dishes. The final power set is almost not even worth talking about because we literally gain it at the end of the game. I do like the way it's used at the end, but it's only used for one mission, and then we beat the game, so we can't really use it anymore unless you've saved all of the side missions until the end for some reason. It's pretty clunky as well, meaning that you're not really going to be interested in going back and testing it out just for its own purpose. I will say though that I absolutely love the new powers in the game in general. Adding variety to the powers was a journey that Infamous 2 had already started. Creating completely separate power sets is fantastic and makes each section of the game feel fresh, even if they aren't that balanced. The concepts for the powers are also awesome, and not exactly standard powers that superheroes are known for using. Even in the last 2 games, electricity and cold are pretty basic as far as powers go. Harnessing Neon and Video are 2 of the most unique powers I've ever seen in a game. They also bring the powers into the city of Seattle, an urban environment bustling with signs. Neon lights on rain-slick pavement is pretty distinct imagery for the place. A few things have changed though in terms of exploration and the open world. We still have districts in the city, and we can still push out the enemies in those districts by completing tasks. Infamous Second Son is just a little more organized in this regard and follows more of a modern open world design philosophy. Each section of the city is controlled by the DUP, an organization that is essentially hunting down and rounding up bioterrorists. We can complete tasks in these districts to reduce DUP control. We can destroy the mobile DUP command centers, which allow us to see all of the blast shards in the area. Collecting these also reduces DUP control percentage. We can destroy surveillance cameras in the area, we can seek out hidden agents, we can locate dead drops, etc. Once the DUP control is below 30%, we can have a standoff with the DUP. If we win the battle, we humiliate them into leaving the district. We also have optional tasks that we can complete around the city that are tied to karma. These are mostly the same as in Infamous 2. They are randomized events like completing a drug bust or taking out some protesters. These just increase our karmic level like any other karma action. It's also interesting to see the murder street performer optional activity return. Like, these games are so obsessed with just obliterating people playing bucket drums for some reason. There are 2 sets of side missions that are totally standalone though. These were DLC that would later be included with the game, but that were either pre-order bonuses or paid DLC on launch. The first, Cole's Legacy, sees us going on a few short missions for Raymond Wolf, the brother of Dr. Wolf from the last game. He's trying to get the word out about what Cole did, and we have to help him. It essentially links Infamous 2 with Second Son, and Zeke even makes an appearance at the end to give a rousing speech.
I'm sure you've got a lot of questions about what's going on with your body. Your hormones are on fire, and you just want to explode.
Whoa, man, what are you talking about?
But you gotta keep in all that conduit juice. It's dangerous. You understand me? Now, when the time is right, you will find the right person to direct it towards. And that moment is gonna be a turning point for you, my friend. It'll be like a big fireworks sandwich. And you just want to make sure that you are safe about biting into that fireworks sandwich. Because it's gonna have fireworks in it.
The second set of missions is called Paper Trail and features a conduit that can control paper, usually leaving a trail of origami behind them. It's actually the coolest power in the entire game, but we don't get to use it. This mission set was released weekly, and you were actually supposed to use a website, infamouspapertrail.com, to fill in the blanks of the mystery each week, but this website is unfortunately not around anymore. The upgrade system in Second Son is something closer to a normal skill tree. We don't exactly get options here like the previous entry, we're mainly just upgrading and unlocking new powers. We spend blast shards here, which we gain mostly just from exploration. Playing an evil character will give you not entirely different abilities, but different traits for the abilities you already have. And these are mostly in line with the previous entries as well. If you're playing an evil character, then your attacks are easily going to spread to nearby enemies. And if you're playing a good character, you'll be more focused on precision and preserving life. One interesting thing that I noticed while playing my evil playthrough was the difference in karmic attacks. Since it's incredibly easy to build up an evil karmic meter, there's actually a timer on the chain. It works more like a karmic kill streak than the good one does, because you can pretty easily take out a group of civilians or kill enemies to get it going. I thought this was a good choice for balance between the two, even though the evil side felt a bit more powerful overall than the good one did. The gameplay for Second Son is probably just alright. I would put it above the first game, but behind Infamous 2. At certain points in the game, it felt like the height of the entire series, and at other times, it just felt frustrating to interface with. It was weirdly difficult at times, but that difficulty felt tied to whether I had unlocked certain upgrades or not. The system always just felt like they were on the cusp of breaking apart, and sometimes they would. I would reach a section where it just felt like I kept dying over and over to no avail. It wasn't often enough that it made the game bad, because when the systems do work, they are incredibly fun and immersive. But it's probably time that we talk about the story of Infamous Second Son. The game begins with a text crawl. 7 years ago, conduits emerged. This game takes place 7 years after the events of Infamous 2. In response, the DUP, or Department of Unified Protection, was formed to hunt down bioterrorists and detain them. This task seems to have been complete, and the reins are now being handed over to the military to oversee the imprisoned. The first transport of bioterrorists is set to leave a DUP detention facility today, but the game tells us it will never arrive. We see a truck weaving through the mountains, and our new main character, Delson Rowe, is getting ready to deface a local sheriff election sign with some spray paint. Second Son came out pretty early on in the life cycle of the PS4, so it uses quite a lot of the new features of that system. There's a lot of these spray paint mini games because Delsin is a graffiti artist. Most of them are optional, but they're short sections where we have to aim paint in the stencils that Delsin puts up. They're actually pretty fun and work well with the motion controls on the DualShock 4. The game also uses the touchpad for swipe controls quite a bit. After this game, I don't remember a ton of games actually using the touchpad to its full extent like this. Most of them just immediately retreated to using it as an extra button in the middle of the controller, so it was kind of nice to see something try and put it to use. As Delsin finishes his new masterpiece on Reggie Rowe's campaign billboard, the cops show up. He realizes that he quickly needs to flee for the local longhouse to establish an alibi. He's pretty quickly caught by Betty, but she allows him to slip out the back. We have to traverse along the nearby cliffs and eventually make it to the longhouse, where Reggie is already waiting for us. Reggie is Delsin's older brother and scalds him for his graffiti work, and it doesn't seem like this is the first time. We can glean a lot of things from this conversation. First of all, that Reggie is pretty fed up with his brother. Delsin is clearly rebellious, a bit younger, and a little carefree. He's looking for his purpose in this world and currently is a little lost. Reggie is more established. He's a town sheriff with a place in his community and is embarrassed that his brother hasn't stepped up to the plate yet. This is the dynamic that a lot of the future narrative will play off of. But during this argument, the truck we saw here earlier crashes. Reggie saves one of the prisoners from the vehicle that's crushing him. He turns out to be a conduit and takes Delsin hostage, but by touching him, Delsin receives some of his powers. He passes out and wakes up, unable to control the new abilities that he's just received. Reggie is down the road, also crushed under a truck by the escaping convict. Delsin saves Reggie using his new abilities, and Reggie calms him down as he starts to freak out a little bit.
I can't stop it. Reggie, I can't stop it, man. It's okay. You're okay. Just breathe. Breathe. You're all right. You're all right. I'm one of them, man. I'm one of them. No. No. You are my brother. All right? You are my brother. Okay.
The two head to the nearby cannery to try and stop the prisoner. We have to head inside the burning building and save Betty. Delsin chases the man down and when touching him once again, receives a quick flash of his memories. This will happen a few times throughout the game, and these moments are where the game chooses to use the series' signature motion comic style cutscenes. Hank's backstory shows that he escaped prison and got powers. He used those powers to steal, but was quickly locked up again by the DUP. They tortured the inmates with tests, and eventually Hank picked the right moment. He caused the crash that happened outside. He warns Delsin against getting caught because he'll get sent to the same prison that he was in. After struggling with Hank for a few minutes, he gets out of the cannery and Delsin escapes behind him. We see him quickly enveloped in stone by the DUP outside. Here we meet Augustine, a higher up in the DUP. She quickly corrects Delsin when he calls Hank a conduit. Their organization likes to use the word bioterrorist because conduit sympathizes with their cause. She quickly suspects him though. Augustine tells Delsin a bit about their cause and shows off her zealotry that she has for the organization. Delsin quickly points out the hypocritical nature of this though, because she herself is a conduit. But because he spoke up, she realizes he's hiding something and uses her powers to torture him for information. Betty offers to tell them what happened, and of course, Augustine decides to use Delsin's tribe against him. We have our first choice here. We can either turn ourselves in, sparing the tribe, or let them be tortured for information. If we turn ourselves in and tell Augustine we got powers from Hank, she doesn't believe us and questions the tribe anyways. We learn later that they didn't talk. If we hang the tribe out to dry, then we are knocked out and they still don't talk, but we're scolded by Betty later for this decision. Delsin wakes up in the longhouse, which has been turned into a makeshift hospital. Betty is recovering from her wounds, concrete sticking out of her leg. She comforts Delsin, telling him that just because he has powers doesn't mean he's a bioterrorist, introducing the idea that there's a difference between bioterrorist and conduit. Reggie links back up with Delsin, telling him that the tribe is dying. They can't remove the shards from their bodies without Augustine's concrete powers. Delsin realizes that he needs to get her powers to heal the tribe. This means they need to head to Seattle, something that Reggie only reluctantly agrees to because he sees no other way out of this. The two have an argument in the car where Reggie sort of lets it slip that he thinks bioterrorists are freaks. Delsin obviously doesn't agree with this, but these are the beginning cracks and fractures in the relationship just starting now. The two quickly reach a roadblock that's been completely destroyed by concrete and neon. Here we gain some blast shards, and Reggie finds a bus full of people that need help. He drives the bus towards the city, and we have to destroy blockades in the way. When Delsin joins back up with Reggie, though, he tells him that the people in the bus are scared, and that he can't bring Delsin in the bus with them. He's going to have to walk. This is such a crushing moment for both playthroughs because either way, Delsin has had these powers forced on him. He's only been trying to do the right thing, only been trying to save people. He wanted to save his community from the conduit prisoner, and he wants to save his tribe from the powers that are killing them. And now, because of that, he's being shunned by people that don't even know him, and his own brother. But also because the gift of power has been sort of a blessing for Delsin. He isn't as reluctant to hone his abilities as Cole was. He's been waiting for this moment, waiting for an opportunity, a purpose. But now he realizes that this purpose comes with consequence. Delsin makes his own way into the city and is immediately attacked by some looters. On the way, the DUP decides to decommission the roadway into Seattle, and we're forced to float across the crumbling wreckage. The bus is caught in the fallout, and Delsin rescues his brother once again. There's a checkpoint on the way into the city, which Reggie is of course worried about. He says they might be able to get through because Delsin isn't a normal bioterrorist. This is once again Reggie sort of warping his worldview to make sense of his brother. He knows Delsin, and he knows he's rebellious, but he isn't a bioterrorist. So instead of realizing that the media, and assumingly the government, has twisted the narrative to make him think all people with powers are terrorists, he just fits his brother in as an outlier, some sort of accident, but definitely not a freak like the rest of them. The two try to pass through the checkpoint, and of course the DUP quickly realizes Delsin is a conduit. They're forced to fight their way into the city, and since the two are being tracked, Delsin has to take out one of their command centers to stop them. We eventually track down some core relays in the city, big devices that give Delsin new powers. After he's fully kitted out, they decide to take the DUP's central communications so that they can move around the city a bit easier. This happens to be connected to the Space Needle, so we climb the monument and remove the tech junk on the outside, returning the tower to its former glory. We're then allowed to choose one of 4 symbols that will become the sigil for our movement going forward. Reggie decides to try and get a lead on more escaped conduits. Delsin sees a local news report on his recent actions, and also that there is a conduit sniper in the city taking people out. We can go investigate, where we quickly find neon tracks placed around murder scenes. We track the conduit through a variety of different crime scenes, all with victims strung up and marked off with neon. We eventually find out that all of the victims are drug dealers, with tons of arrests on their record. We find the hideout of the conduit, who is revealed to be a woman named Fetch. Fetch has some interesting items here, like a sign with the name Brent on it, and a strange painting of a face. And Delsin says that Jane Eyre is Catcher in the Rye for women, which is just kind of crazy.
Seriously? A serial killer who reached Jane Eyre?
Oh, totally. Jane Eyre is like the female Catcher in the Rye.
Reggie traces the face and finds a match to a Brent Walker. He was arrested for drug possession and then died of a puncture wound to the chest. We can find the scene of his murder, where there's a massive neon mural set up. It seems like Fetch was related to Brent in some way. She tragically has a painting of him that she talks to while eating lunch every day. We can hide out at her favorite restaurant to track her down, but we gain some of her powers and then have to chase her down as she runs away. We eventually corner her to an abandoned theater. There's a really neat boss fight here. Since we don't have any neon powers yet outside of the dash, we can't really hurt Fetch too much. Plus, we don't want to anyways. The only way we can defeat her is to drain the neon signs around the theater, so she runs out of power to attack us with. We can shoot her a few times to weaken her, and then Delsin receives her memories. Her powers manifest when she was a child, but her parents turned her in. Brent and Fetch both ran away from home. After being homeless for a while, they both started using. Being high and thinking that Brent stole her drugs, she turned on him and did something unforgivable. She was taken in by the DUP and trained to kill. She was in the crash with Hank and escaped, set out on a path of vengeance against the dealers that got her and Brent hooked in the first place. Reggie immediately wants to turn Fetch in. Once again, he sees Delsin and Fetch differently. He thinks that Fetch is a murderer, and that vigilante justice isn't the way to do things. But if that's true, then what is Delsin? We have a choice here, to redeem Fetch or to corrupt her. Either way, we are working with her moving forward, but this choice is about the sort of motivation that we give her to continue on. Do we redeem her by helping her learn self-control and taking out the dealers by subduing them, or do we turn her on the dealers and the DUP, use her rage as a weapon in our own motivations? The one thing I really enjoy about the moral choices in Second Son is that they are often about the people around you. It's not just about how you affect them, but the evil path is often about actively using them for your own means. This selfishness, this corruption, comes from the power that Delsin receives, from his motivation to save his tribe, to do whatever it takes, even if it means sending others down the same path that he is on. This is sort of a contrast to previous games, where your crew was set in their ways regardless of what you did. They presented you with options, and you either sided with them or didn't. This game sees you affecting those companions rather than siding with them. They're going to be there regardless. What will you do with them, though? There's also this complexity in morality with Fetch and her situation. Delsin is pretty fine with the fact that she murdered drug dealers, and Reggie is totally against this. He wants to bring her in. There really isn't a total right or a wrong here. Like, is it probably bad to murder people? Yeah. Are they bad people that deserve to be punished in some way? Definitely. But in this world, things are a little different. Delsin is accidentally murdering people all of the time in the game. Not in the narrative, but in the gameplay. So does it really matter if Fetch murdered a couple drug dealers? It's a complicated situation, one that the game just kind of reduces to a black and white choice. But it's not really a choice. We aren't choosing whether we will work with her or not, just choosing how we use her moving forward, as if she's a weapon instead of a human being. This is because if we redeem Fetch, then she'll assumingly stop murdering drug dealers and become a better person, but it's still an odd decision to use such a complicated dilemma and then just reduce it to red or blue. Reggie is pretty pissed off regardless of the choice that we make. We end up working with Fetch to try and get some new neon powers after this. This involves following her around the city and draining more core relays. And if we redeemed her, then throughout this mission, we'll see that she has started subduing the dealers instead of killing them. We then have our first moral choice mission. We have two options here for the next mission that we take. The good mission is called Trash the Stash and sees us invading the docks where a lot of the dealers' suppliers are hanging out. We mark a bunch of drug boats for destruction while Fetch takes them out. We then have to follow a dealer truck and rescue some people while also getting rid of the product. The evil mission is called Fight Intolerance and sees us targeting the protesters advocating against conduits. There's a lot of these around the city, and we can attack them for some evil karma, but this mission sees Fetch and Delsin attacking them to try and get to their leader. Fetch eventually tracks their leader to Pioneer Tunnel, and we have to help her out by fighting off the hordes of DUP. Fetch ends up capturing the leader, and we broadcast her message to the people as she murders him in cold blood. It's pretty brutal, actually, and really straight up embodies the evil side of this playthrough. Up to this point, we've only had access to one half of Seattle, and at this point, we can head to the bridge that connects the two parts of the city. So we take on the DUP on the bridge in a section that feels very reminiscent to the beginning of the first Infamous game. Reaching the end, we get to Augustine, who is waiting for us. She's interested in Delsin now, mainly because she's heard that he has multiple powers. So she turns on neon lights and summons a new boss to bait him. We have to take it down, proving the fact that we have new powers. Delsin tries to ask politely for her concrete powers, but she captures him in stone instead. Suddenly, something arrives and takes Delsin away, flying him across the city and dropping him on a roof. This breaks him out of his shell, and he's quickly contacted by an anonymous individual, a fan of Delsin's work. He wants to help Delsin intercept a convoy that's transporting conduits through the city. We break the struts on a bridge and collapse the convoy as it moves in. We can then head for one of the buses, but Delsin is incapacitated by a helicopter that crashes into him. We can follow the signal to different DUP buses scattered all over the city. In the process, we encounter flying armored angels attacking DUP agents. They seem to be friendly and coming from the third escaped conduit from the car crash at the beginning of the game. The angels are capturing suspected conduits in the area, though, and eventually Reggie offers himself as bait so they can track where the conduits are being taken. Tracking Reggie back to a central location, we find angels popping out of nearby televisions. We can destroy these screens to stop them from spreading, and we eventually reach a small underground hovel that our anonymous fan tells us not to enter. We eventually do because Delsin believes the conduit might be inside. We're quickly transported to what seems like an in-world video game, where we have to fight a massive boss. This is easily one of the better boss fights in the game, but it's dragged down a bit by the fact that it's so long. We have to move across these floating platforms, 2 of which have sources from which we can grab neon and smoke powers. We then have to attack the massive flying angel in front of us with these powers. After doing enough damage, he'll move to another area and the platforms we're on will descend into the lava. We'll have to move to a different set of platforms to attack him again, but the whole thing is just really well designed. It's fun and there's a good sense of scale. Like I said though, it's just far too long. We don't do a ton of damage to him, so it just takes a while to whittle his health down. After defeating him, we appear back in the real world with the conduit that's causing all of this. Delsin gets his powers and some of his memories. Eugene was picked on quite a lot in school. He sunk a lot of time into a game called Heaven's Hellfire. He had control in the game, and no control in the real world. One day they pushed him too far and he summoned a demon in school. He was captured by the DUP for 6 years. They were forcing him to summon creations for them. He was then caught in the crash and escaped to Seattle, wanting to stop Augustine just like the rest. Reggie then shows up, wanting again to take in Eugene, and it's clear at this point that Reggie just wants to lock up anyone that's a conduit, that isn't Delsin anyways. We once again have a choice to redeem or corrupt Eugene. We can either help him learn control and to work with us against the DUP, or we can corrupt him so that he can get revenge on the bullies. Delsin ends up showing Reggie the error of his ways, his hypocritical nature. Delsin gives Eugene a pep talk, asking him to be a part of their movement. Or if we're evil, Eugene asks Delsin to help him find the Russian gang that's been attacking conduits in the city. Before we can do this, Delsin has to get his powers back. When he got the video powers from Eugene, he lost all of his other ones. So we have to drain core relays around the city to get more access to these new abilities. Reggie doesn't want Delsin to do this, of course. He puts up a big fuss when he talks about seeking out new powers. He thinks that Delsin is kind of getting lost in this whole thing, and at his core, he's just really worried about his brother. At this point, we have another choice between 2 missions. Eugene thinks the Akuras, a Russian crime syndicate in the city, are up to something. So we can either take a mission where we attack the Akuras and try to save the hostages they've rescued, or we can just take out the Akurans and hunt them down. Shortly after this, we get a report of a conduit in the city causing some trouble. We can go investigate and find out that it's Hank. He's running away from the DUP and we have to track him down. He eventually knocks Delsin out and calls him when he wakes up. He wants Hank's help, but Hank definitely doesn't want any part of it. He ends up relenting on this front and eventually gives us a hand. We have to get to Augustine's tower in the city, but she has electric fences set up that prevent us from neon running up the tower. Hank wants to draw her out of her castle so that we can deactivate the transformer and take her out. We meet Reggie outside of the huge island the DUP have set up. Hank and Delsin's brother are immediately confrontational, but Reggie helps anyways, commandeering a boat to scout up ahead of us. We infiltrate the place with Hank and start taking out support struts, but when we get to a core relay to hopefully gain a new power, the twist is revealed. Hank has been double-crossing us the entire time. He was working with Augustine to get something he wanted. She encases Delsin's hands in concrete, but luckily Reggie is ready with a rocket launcher. We can run across this area but can't use our powers. Reggie eventually gets the cuffs off, but Augustine attacks, encasing Reggie in concrete, and with him hanging from the side of a platform, Delsin has no choice but to let go. Reggie falls to his death in the water below. Angered, we have a boss fight with Augustine here. We have to destroy her concrete shields and attack her before kicking her on the ground. If we do this 3 times, then we build up a karmic ability and can dive from the air to destroy her. The end of this fight cuts to a news broadcast as Delsin's repeated attacks destroy the entire island. Delsin ends up back on shore in Seattle and fights through waves of DUP to get to Hank. We eventually find him on the docks and we have another choice here. It's sort of revealed that Hank was doing all of this to see his daughter, who is on a boat in the water. So we have to choose. Do we kill Hank for getting Reggie killed, letting Delsin fall into his cycle of revenge, or do we spare him, understanding that he was at the whim of the DUP, just like everyone else? Either way, Delsin plans to get his real revenge by heading to the tower in this city and finishing this thing. At the beginning of the mission, we can choose whether we want to capture Augustine or kill her. It doesn't change the mission itself, but the ending that we get and what happens after. Delsin ascends the tower, and on the way up, we're assisted by both Eugene and Fetch as they make our way easier. We eventually break into the tower and have a confrontation with Augustine. She claims that she's protecting the conduits, not killing them. Not one of them has died in 7 years. She imprisons them because she wants her kind kept away from the world that would hurt them. She is essentially selling herself here as the devil you know, because the military will be a far worse devil. We have a fight here that resembles the battle we participated in on the DUP island. After defeating her once, though, she finally gives Delsin her powers. We see Augustine's memories here. She was in the military 7 years ago, on the front line against conduits. She was given powers and traveled through a city with a survivor. People were attacking conduits openly, so they had to hide. The military did the same when they took over. She found herself stuck between conduit and military. She decided to take her survivor friend captive to show them that she was on their side. This allowed her to form the DUP and save as many conduits as she could. Second Son is essentially a story about marginalization, about a society that deems something they don't understand, something that looks and acts different, a threat. Delsin faces this discrimination at the hands of the DUP, as do all the other conduits in the game. We are shown news stories throughout the narrative that automatically side with the military and the government, no matter what, that warp and twist public perception against the bioterrorist threat. The government's propaganda and words have bled into everyday life. Even Betty from the beginning of the game calls conduits bioterrorists.
All that matters is I'm one of them now.
You are not one of those beady-eyed bioterrorists who go around killing people higgly-piggly. You're a good boy. Just happen to have smoke coming out of your fingers.
An authoritarian state has allowed a private organization to control the detainment of the people they call criminals. This discrimination is felt by all conduits, but regular people are eager to just forget about it and shirk them off as bioterrorists, not to be trifled with. Augustine represents something else, someone who decided that she would rather her people be locked away, segregated from normal society, than hunted down and killed in freedom. Whether you think what Augustine did was good or evil, she was doing what she thought was right. Sure, she may have prevented the deaths of these individuals, but she took away their freedom, their ability to choose. She tested them and forced them to train. It's a strange, malformed idea of justice. She then transforms into a giant rock monster and we have to fight her. This fight is easily the worst in the entire game for a lot of reasons. For as many things as Second Son gets right, it really does end on a pretty big down note. In this fight, since we just got concrete powers, we have no access to the other three. Eugene shows up shortly to start chucking in core relays for us to gain new powers from. This means that most of the fight ends up feeling like a tutorial for a new set of powers, rather than a final boss battle for the game. Now, I get what they were trying to do here. The concrete power is the thing that we've been searching for the entire game. Delsin has wanted it so that he could save and heal his tribe. So finally gaining that power should be a big moment. And having you gain that power in the final battle is kind of a good idea, because it's the culmination of everything we've been working towards. I like the idea, just not the execution. This also leaves the concrete power feeling flat because it's the end of the game, and outside of the narrative, we probably won't use it much after this. It's also not very good. Regardless, we defeat Augustine, ultimately culminating in one of two endings. If we took the good path, then Delsin captures Augustine in concrete and they dismantle the tower. She gets hauled away and the DUP is set to free all of the conduits from their facility. Delsin then returns home to Betty. He heals her and the tribe of their concrete illness. She, of course, sadly asks where Reggie is, and we then see the circle of this narrative close, as Delsin is in the same spot as he was in the beginning of the game, spray painting his brother's campaign poster, but this time it's a memorial. In the evil ending, Delsin kills Augustine, the monsters Augustine created taking their revenge. With the DUP driven out of Seattle, Delsin, Eugene, and Fetch now have control of the city. Delsin himself is using the conduits that they've let out of prison to take his pick of abilities. When he gets back to the Longhouse, Betty is incredibly angry at him. She's seen what he did in Seattle on TV. She kicks him out, not wanting his powers to heal them and preventing Delsin from completing his journey. Second Son's story overall is kind of hit and miss. Certain parts of it are an interesting exploration of that original idea that the team had for Infamous. What would it be like if a real person got powers? How would that person use those powers? Would you add to the exploitation of this world and further drive people into rage and vengeance, or would you save them and make them better than they were before? And further than that, how would the world react? How would a society and culture handle people with abilities springing up from nowhere? This is a question that comics have been asking for a while, but I think Second Son handles it well. Delsin's journey is one of struggle, discrimination, ostracization, and pain, all in the interest of him eventually rising to the top and saving his family. It's the classic hero's journey story that we've seen 1,000 times, and honestly, I think Second Son, even though it's the newest game in the series, is the least well-aged of the three, mostly because it sort of came at the beginning of Sony exclusive games all having the same sort of revenge plotline copy and pasted over and over again. Obviously, there are outliers in there, and some are better than others, but revisiting this game's story today, it feels like the beginning of a long line of cookie-cutter stories. That being said, it doesn't entirely discredit the game. Second Son is still fun to play for the most part. The heavy combat mechanics feel immersive and realistic. At certain points, the gameplay feels like what the studio was trying to create all along, a genuine interpretation of superpowers in real life. I just don't think I enjoyed Second Son as much as the other two games in the series. I think I really would have enjoyed the original idea for the game, though. In some interviews, Nate Fox stated that the original canon ending for Infamous 2 was supposed to be the evil ending, but because so many people chose the good ending, they made the more popular one canon. I can envision a version of Second Son where we play Delsin Rowe, a new conduit who has to rise up against an evil Cole McGrath, who has gone mad with power, who rules a desolate wasteland with an iron fist. Our moral choices here are about either rising to overtake his spot at the top or returning the world to a state of peace and safety. But Infamous Second Son was once again well received by critics and fans alike. It currently has an 80 out of 100 on Metacritic, and it became the fastest selling entry in the series almost immediately. But Sucker Punch had one more standalone entry in the series before they would be moving on for greener pastures. Infamous First Light was released on August 26, 2014 in North America and August 27, 2014 in the PAL region, both for the Sony PlayStation 4. Just like Festival of Blood, Infamous First Light serves as a standalone expansion to the game that it's attached to. First Light is a prequel story that focuses on Fetch. We play the character bouncing back and forth between when she was detained at the DUP facility being trained by Augustine, and 2 years prior as she is getting ready to do a final job with Brent to get out of Seattle. The two are quickly separated, and Fetch has to look for her brother in the city. She has to work with Shane, a nefarious dealer that Brent was doing jobs for, to get him back. The whole story is great and gives Fetch a pretty great motivation for what she ends up doing when we see her in Second Son. She ends up getting her revenge here on Shane as well, and he becomes the first target of her rage, meaning that by the time we see her, she's just extending a line of bodies behind her. Justice will never be complete. She will never be satisfied with the deaths, making both the corruption and redemption paths for her story more layered. But honestly, the place where First Light shines is its gameplay. I never played this expansion on release, but I just assumed that we'd have the same neon powers as Delsin did in the main game. This isn't true though. First Light greatly expands on the neon powers and makes them even better in my opinion. And overall, First Light is just better tailored and more ironed out of an experience than Second Son is. Sure, it's much shorter, but there's a lot of extra stuff to do. The mechanics are dialed in and smooth, and the story is short and sweet. So since we only have one power set in First Light, the upgrade system is completely revamped. We have single skill trees for each of the abilities that we have. Much of the basics resemble the neon powers that we get in the main game, but the way that we can meaningfully upgrade them is totally different. We can focus shots and aim for enemy weak points, and since there's no karma in First Light, we don't have to worry about subduing or killing. These weak point shots can eventually be upgraded so that enemies are turned onto your side instead of subdued, fighting for you for a brief period. The traversal system is upgraded greatly. We can now do an air dash if we upgrade our regular dash, which prevents a lot of careening towards the ground when infinite running. The traversal system also seems to allow us to pass through a lot of the objects on the ground now, like fences and other things that smoke would normally go through in the main game. Fetch also has neon clouds on the ground that she can run through to increase her speed. These make traveling around the city really smooth. We also have a stasis attack, which acts like the stasis grenade we use in the main game. This also can be upgraded to travel farther and knock enemies off of buildings. It actually functions quite a lot like the electric blast from the first two games that Cole had. We eventually get both a neon rocket power and full neon blast abilities that function differently from Delson's version. The rocket is a heat-seeking missile, and the neon blast is basically a black hole that drags everything into it nearby. And it all just feels great, primarily since the game doesn't have to spread its focus across 3 power sets. Progression and combat is allowed to focus on one and nail it down, rather than giving the player 3 or 4 that might just be alright. Just like the base game, there's a lot of exploration around the city that we can do. We can clear out the districts, but this time we aren't pushing DUP out, we're just searching for more neon lumens, these floating red clouds that give us upgrade points. Weirdly, the upgrade points in this expansion aren't blast shards, but they're actually just sucker punch points. Kind of odd, but not totally immersion breaking. We can earn these points around the city by spraying some neon graffiti like we see Fetch do in the main game. We can also participate in these races that see us chasing down larger neon lumens for more upgrade points. We can also deactivate police drones to completely clear out a district. Completing all districts, though, will not give you enough points to upgrade all of your abilities. This is because the game has a ton of challenges for you to complete, which also give you upgrade points. Some of these are done out in the world, stopping a certain amount of occurring drive-bys, destroying DUP APCs, or saving hostages from attackers. But a lot of the challenges are done inside the training arena that Fetch spent time in with the DUP. Here, she is forced to defeat waves of enemies, holographic ones actually summoned by Eugene, while he was also trapped there. These enemies can be Occurrens, DUP soldiers, or even demons and angels because Eugene loves his video game so much that he can't help himself. During these wave arena missions, we can rack up high scores by increasing our multiplier. This comes from killing enemies before the timer expires. Getting a high enough score will give us more challenge completions and more upgrade points to enhance our abilities. These challenges are incredibly fun, and it's actually kind of insane that none of the games before had something like this that made them super replayable. The arena on its own takes the game from a 4-hour game to at least 10 or 15 because you can just spend so much time trying to get every challenge or increase your high scores. It's a damn good time just being able to have fun with the combat system and test your abilities. First Light overall is just a great expansion. It's required playing if you even enjoyed Second Son at all, then you have to check it out. It contextualizes the base game more, it expands and focuses the base game's mechanics, and it adds a ton more content for the player to explore and master. First Light got mixed to positive reception on release, receiving a 73 out of 100 on Metacritic. This would be the last piece of media released in the infamous franchise, as Sucker Punch would move on to developing Ghosts of Tsushima after this. The reason I decided to cover this series was because, for as many people say that they miss the infamous series, I feel like it doesn't get the credit it deserves. It was a truly original superhero franchise that started in video game form, rather than on film or in comic books. It's a place in the market that has now been taken by adaptations of already existing characters like Insomniac's Spider-Man or their upcoming Wolverine game. And this is a much more profitable avenue than trying to create a realistic, unique superhero world. It represents a unique superhero origin story, a martyr tale about a savior and a new generation of conduits trying to carry on his legacy. The morality is the series' through line. The questions that the game asks you are the most important things that Infamous does. What would you do if you had superpowers? Would you sacrifice yourself to save the world? Can you put duty over revenge? These questions are at the core of Infamous and what the game is really about. While it toys with other messages and themes, the positions that it puts you in are the most impactful things the game does. The games do represent a moral gray, but generally outside of the protagonists themselves, because the series isn't really about the moral gray. The gray is for the rest of the world, and the binary is for the main character. That might be what would kind of hold the series down for a modern revival today, that games, especially about morality, have moved on from clear good versus evil systems. Users and audiences have clearly asked for more complex moral decisions and the ability to weigh those decisions and make those choices in games. But at the same time, Infamous presents both a hellish and wonderful fantasy, a world where you're given the responsibility of the hero. Can you take that mantle? Can you bear that weight? The mechanics feed back into these decisions, not only reflecting the narrative choices the player makes, but also allowing the player to use their powers in the world. The games are fantastic superhero playgrounds. They allow you to either enact your will on the world by terrorizing the populace, which is fun in a sick Grand Theft Auto mayhem kind of way, or rally against those trying to do that very thing and become a real hero. Infamous as a series at this point is sort of destined to stay in the past. Sucker Punch has seen great success with their Ghost games. Ghost of Tsushima and Yote are both fantastic games that have received critical acclaim and incredible sales numbers, so the developers definitely aren't returning to the series anytime soon. Nate Fox recently stated in an interview that only 10% of Sucker Punch would be excited to work on a new Sly game. That number might be slightly larger for Infamous since it's a bit newer, but the comments clearly show that the people working at the studio have moved on from these series. And that's fine. The only thing I'd really be interested in seeing at this point is at least some sort of port, at least bring the games to PC for preservation's sake. The games still deserve to be revisited by those interested though. Unique remnants of their time, distinctly of their era, and something that probably won't be recreated anytime soon. Bye, Dad. Hey, Dad, thanks again for watching this video. I really wanted to revisit the Infamous games recently, so I decided to just quickly play through all of them and whip up this series video instead of my normal release structure. I hope you enjoyed it, but apologies that it took me so long. If you enjoyed the video and want to support the channel, you can like the video and subscribe, which really helps me out. You can also head over to the Patreon where I upload reviews of video game film adaptations and monthly media reports where I talk about every piece of media that I consumed in that month. You'll be able to join this list of fantastic people on screen as well. I also stream on Twitch and YouTube every week on Thursday at 4 p.m. EST, so come hang out with us over there. I have a lot of other videos in the pipeline this year, so keep an eye out. I'll see you next time. Bye, Dad.